Hello, I'm Carolyn Mugar, Director of Farm Aid. I sure am glad that we can all be here together. When we first set out to try to make this happen, of course, we hoped that we would be together in the same room, coming from far and wide. The annual Farm Aid Festival always brings together farmers and farm advocates from around the country for trainings and organizing, for demonstrations and calls to action, and for sharing stories and looking back on the road we've taken to get where we are today, and especially where we want to go and what we want to do. Together, we are able to see more clearly, to envision better horizons and imagine and create ways to get there. We gather to strengthen our community, our voice, and the purpose we share. Today's Farmers Town Hall reflects the DNA of Farm Aid. First and foremost, we listen to farmers. That comes from our founder, Willie Nelson, who has always made it his practice to listen deeply, to learn, and to find a way to offer support. We are grateful for the opportunity today to hear from farmers and ranchers from across the country, to not just learn of their challenges, of which there are many, but also to learn about their ideas, the opportunities they create, and their dreams. We are equally grateful to have with us policymakers and leaders who can put these ideas and opportunities into action. And many of them, while they sit in positions of government power now, come from our own community, our grassroots. Now is a moment of unprecedented opportunity, one that we have worked for together for many years. Today, impactful systemic change is possible for our farmers, our ranchers, for all of those of us who eat, for our soil, water, and climate, our communities, and our country. I thank you for being here today, especially the farmers and ranchers who are taking time away from their demanding workday to join. We may not be able to share a handshake or a hug in this format, but we can share our stories, our experiences, and our expertise. Together, even apart, our strength is great. I would now like to introduce Scott Marlowe from North Carolina, who has been working putting this together, who will introduce us to some of what's happening this afternoon.
Thank you, Carolyn. Welcome today to the Farm Aid Virtual Town Hall for Farm Aid 2021, here from the Xfinity Theater in Hartford, Connecticut. Farm Aid is in its 36th year. We're here to gather once again. Before we get started, I wanted to note that this town hall is being translated. The translation information is being put up onto the screen. I apologize for my poor Spanish language skills, but we are having live translation as we go. We want to thank all of you for being here today. Thank you to the Commissioners of Agriculture, members of Congress, the leadership staff of USDA, and the Senate Agriculture Committee, who will be engaging in this conversation with us this afternoon. We want to thank all of you for your very significant commitment of time. More importantly, thank you to the many farmers who are giving up their critical time during harvest to join us and bring their stories and experience to these proceedings. Too often the voices of farmers are drowned out in our policy discussions, and today we will hear specifically from farmers on their experiences and their questions. We're in a critical moment today for our country, our food, and American agriculture. We have both great challenges and great opportunities, and are at a tipping point on the structure of agriculture, global climate change, and a series of other issues. We have current and pending legislation that actively addresses recovery from COVID, issues of competition, climate change, equity. And in this moment, Farm Aid is committing to doing what Farm Aid has done, which is to bring people together and center the voices of farmers in the field. No one is going to agree with everything that is said today, but it is critical that we come together to hear each other's voices. And we hope that all of you will hear in the questions and answers new perspectives and are able to hold policymakers accountable to their statements. We're very grateful to the many farmers who submitted questions to this forum. We will get to absolutely as many of them as we can, but there is no way for us to get to all of them. But we will, as we go along, identify ways for individuals participating in this town hall to get their questions answered and engage with the policymakers who are joining us. In a few minutes, we'll ground ourselves in the experience of farmers here in Connecticut and across the Northeast. And we'll hear from the Commissioners of Agriculture, Brian Hurlbert of Connecticut, John LeBeau of Massachusetts, and Richard Ball of New York. We'll also hear recorded comments from several of our members of Congress from the area. In our second hour, we're grateful to have with us Senator Tina Smith, Senator Debbie Stabenow, and Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack. From around 3 until 4:30, we will have a panel of leadership from both USDA and the Senate Agriculture Committee, following which we'll review some of our next steps and wrap up by about 5. As everyone is aware, Zoom meetings and schedules are all complicated these days, so bear with us. Also, we are literally backstage here at the Xfinity Theater. So a little bit later on in the afternoon, if you start hearing some background noise, that may be some of the bands doing their sound check for tomorrow afternoon. A bit of logistics. We're recording this session and it will be available on Farm Aid's YouTube channel. This is a Zoom webinar, so everyone will be muted, but if we call on you to ask your question, you will be brought up as a presenter and you will need to unmute yourself. If you would like to ask a question during the event, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll not be able to see other participants or other questions, but we are monitoring the questions coming in very closely, and we'll bring forward absolutely as many of them as we can. If there are farmers joining us who are facing difficult or emergency situations with their farms, please reach out to the Farm Aid Hotline. The Farm Aid Hotline connects farmers across the country to expert assistance with the issues they face. Today, we're asking folks to use the Request for Assistance page on the Farm Aid website at www.farmaid.org, since, as you can imagine, Farm Aid folks are a bit busy today. But after the event, you can reach out to us on the Farm Aid hotline at 1-800-FARM-AID. With a few more details about the hotline, I'd like to introduce Rachel Van Boven from our hotline team.
Hi, I'm Rachel, an operator here at 1-800-FARM-AID, the only national farmer assistance hotline. When you call 1-800-FARM-AID or use our online requests for assistance tool, we can connect you with resources in your area for farm financial crisis, disaster assistance, access to USDA programs, and other issues. We can also help farmers who are just getting started or those who are transitioning to new enterprises by connecting them with the tools they need. If you want to poke around and check out the resources that are available, you can look at the Farmer Resource Network, where you can connect with organizations around the country. We know that it's difficult in farm country right now, and we want you to know that you're not alone. Whether you call or email or use our online resources, we're here for you.
Thank you, Rachel. We're here in Connecticut. We wanted to start out this conversation by grounding ourselves in the agriculture of this region. So to start out, we're going to hear from 3 farmers from this area.
You don't meet a lot of people, especially in this area, of people of color owning land, so that becomes a problem. And suddenly a lot of recent immigrants are like, where farming is in their blood and that's all they know coming from their country. They come to America and they want to farm, and they don't know the resources, they don't know who to contact. Suddenly at the community farm of Simsbury Gifts of Love Farm, there's just this diverse group of farmers, and I'm like, oh my God, let's bring light to this. This is a story, this is magical, and it's happening, this is new in Connecticut. Farmers I know, especially people of color, have leased land because it's the cheaper route to go if you're a farmer. Everyone should have the right to grow food, no matter where you come from. I mean, it shouldn't be such a struggle. I love food, so I want to be a farmer and I want to be a cook, so I'm recreating how I can put that all together. So I'm thinking about value-added products, like being Cambodian, we eat a lot of lemongrass, so I want to grow lemongrass. And one of our main dishes is kruong, which is a Cambodian sauce, and maybe packaging that kruong. And because everyone that tries it loves it, it's a good marinade, it's great in stews and soups. Both my parents farmed in Cambodia and did not expect their firstborn to become a farmer. but here I am, mom and dad.
When we said a farmer in Maine, everybody's picturing an old Mainer, white Mainer. And people doesn't think like a young African person can be a farmer. In the state of Maine, we are losing a lot of farmers for retirement. What we are trying to do is replace that and make sure the economy, the state economy goes, because we can't replace those people. And we are here to make sure that happens. And we are talking to the state, we are talking to the federal government, trying to get support and funds for these programs so that we can be successful farmers who can replace what we lost.
Rock Bottom Farm was started in the 60s by my father. Started raising meat animals and doing maple syrup and vegetables. By the late 70s, we were milking cows and selling milk on the market. I took over the farm in 1994, and we started the creamery in 2000. So the thing we can grow here really well is grass. If we're growing grass, we got to feed animals. If we're feeding animals, you need to maximize your production of dollars per acre. A lot of dairy farmers are struggling because the overhead is really high, and the price per 100 pounds of milk hasn't changed in 40 plus years. In my lifetime, it's like 70% of the dairy farms that were here are gone. With the grass base that we had, I could milk 35 cows or so and sell milk. You know, we just decided that we were gonna bottle our own milk. So that was the fall of 2000. At the beginning, we did everything. My brother drove the delivery truck, and we milked the cows in the morning and bottled milk all day, and then milked the cows at night and made all the feed. And at the time, we were growing almost all of our grain. My connection to this piece of land is very strong. Human connection to land is profound. You know, like if you disconnect people from land, then they're sort of cast adrift, you know, without that sort of anchor. We hit organic market when it was still expanding, and then we started bottling milk at a time when there was space available and people were interested in local food, and our products have a flavor profile that people really seem to like. If you make something that's exceptionally tasty, people will buy it.
We're now looking forward to hearing video comments from several of the congresspersons from this region. We have video comments from Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut and Congresswoman Shelley Pingree of Maine.
Hey everybody, Chris Murphy, U.S. Senator from Connecticut. We are so excited to have Farm Aid back in Connecticut again this year, and really, really grateful to Farm Aid for having this dialogue between policy makers, leaders in Washington, and farmers all across the country. I'm sorry that I can't be with you there live, but I wanted to just send my thanks to the whole team that makes this possible. Of course, farms matter in Connecticut. We may, not have the big scale farms that some of my colleagues do out in the West and Midwest, but man, we have a lot of new young farmers that are defying the odds in a state with high land costs and making businesses that work and are growing. And so that's why one of the things I hope that you focus on is how we can support beginning farmers and young farmers, especially in places like Connecticut, where it's just not as easy to start up as it is in parts of the country where you can acquire land at a little bit lower cost. We want local food systems in Connecticut. In order to do that, we have to engage in aggressive farmland preservation, but also programs that support our beginner farmers. And so a topic that I know you're going to touch on, but one that I'm really looking forward to working with the entire Farm Aid community on going forward. Have a great, great event. Thanks for being in Connecticut.
Hello, farm friends, agricultural leaders, and Farm Aid organizers. I'm Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, representing the most beautiful district in America, Maine's 1st District. I'm excited to join you all today virtually, although I wish I could be there with you in person. As a farmer myself, I'm proud to be a voice for your needs in Washington today and every day. There's no shortage of critical issues facing our farmers right now, the very real and present effects of climate change, economic hardships brought on by the pandemic, and food production challenges. Some days, the list feels as endless as the chores. I'd like to begin by saying that the time has come and gone to ensure that equity and inclusion are at the center of our farm policies. I'm proud of the work being done by this administration to support Black, Indigenous, and people of color, those who are socially disadvantaged, and beginning and veteran farmers as they participate in our food system in even greater numbers. We know that the American farmscape is forever changing, and welcoming more farmers will benefit us all. We need to build a bigger table and fill it with high-quality American-grown food. Consolidation in the industry is driving small family farms out of the business and pushing some off their land entirely. While this story is an old one by now, the effects are as present as ever. In Congress, I am working to support small and mid-sized farms as they adapt to changing markets. I am also advocating for consistent enforcement of regulations across the board. Too often, family farms do the right thing and play by the rules, while big business uses loopholes to profit. I'm a proud sponsor of the Strengthening Local Processing Act, which will increase options for local livestock and poultry producers and assist smaller facilities in meeting the needs of farmers. These are the real supports that small and mid-sized farms need to be sustainable. We can't ignore the effects of climate change and the toll it is taking on our farmers. My bill, the Agricultural Resilience Act, addresses the climate change crisis head-on. It's an ambitious yet achievable vision with solutions rooted in science, and exactly what we need to empower our farmers to be our allies in this fight. Unpredictable weather means unpredictable harvests, and husbandry making climate change most pressing issue facing not only American farmers, but the entire world and our way of life. My Agricultural Resilience Act was written as a roadmap to help farmers and ranchers sequester more carbon in the soil and reduce their overall greenhouse gas emissions. We need to empower farmers with the best available science and provide a range of conservation tools, because what works for one farmer in Maine may not work for another in Iowa or Georgia. My bill is vital in reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. agriculture by 2040. Through my roles on the House Agriculture Committee and the Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee, I'm honored to be your champion in Congress and support solutions for the agriculture industry. Farmers are nothing if not hopeful, and I will do what I can to ensure that hope is well placed. Thank you.
I'm now pleased to introduce Connecticut Commissioner of Agriculture, Brian Hurlbert, who will introduce fellow commissioners Ball and LeBeau. And we're grateful to all of you for being here. Brian Hurlbert has served as Connecticut's Commissioner of Agriculture since 2019. Previously, he has held numerous other positions working to improve the economic viability of agriculture and food across the state. He served as the Executive Director of the Connecticut Farm Bureau, the Senior Vice President of Program Operations at Wholesome Wave, and the Connecticut State Executive Director for USDA's Farm Service Agency. He was also elected to 4 terms in office as State Representative for the 53rd District. Commissioner Hurlbert.
Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you to Farm Aid. Give me a thumbs up just to make sure my audio is working here. All right, that's I learned a new thing this week about the $10 in the mute jar, so I want to make sure that my $10 goes somewhere more productive. First, I'd like to thank Farm Aid and welcome you all to Connecticut. The artists, the staff, the guests, the people who make it all happen to put on a fantastic show to highlight what I think is one of the most important industries that we have in our state, our region, and our nation. Also, thank you for highlighting V, a farmer in Connecticut who's a great member of our agricultural community, who's not only providing great food for her community, but she's engaging on the policy level and engaging the department to make sure that we're doing the right thing by Connecticut farmers. She's a terrific advocate and has a great future in this state. Connecticut is a state with a history of agriculture that dates well beyond the foundings of our country. We're very proud of that agricultural heritage, productivity, and diversity. Now, I'm very familiar with Connecticut agriculture, but I'm assuming that some folks here aren't. So I'm going to run through a couple of stats before we introduce my two friends a little bit later. Connecticut is home to 5,500 farms operating on 380,000 acres of land. The average size of a Connecticut farm is 69 acres, but 71% of our farmers operate on land that produce on land under 49 acres in total size. In addition to the land that we operate on, we also operate under the water. And in Connecticut, we manage 50,000 acres under Long Island Sound for shellfish operations. All of this adds $4 billion to our state's economy, making it a significant driver of Connecticut's economy, and provides 20,000 jobs for residents in the state. Importantly, 30% of our farmers are new and beginning farmers, and 40% are female farmers. And those are important statistics as we think about where the future of Connecticut agriculture will lie. 95% of our farms are family farm operations, and I visited many of these farms that go back multiple generations and hundreds of years. While we have a great farm economy, we are working to make it a greater and more diverse farm economy. We recently launched a diversity, equity, inclusion working group to engage and support today's and tomorrow's BIPOC producers. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but when we have a little bit more time, because I want to get to our two special guests. First, I'd like to introduce New York Department of Agriculture and Markets Commissioner Richard Ball. Commissioner Ball has dedicated his life to agriculture, both as a farm owner and operator, and through public service, supporting and advocating for agriculture. He has served in numerous positions within the New York State Vegetable Growers Association, the New York Farm Bureau, the American Farm Bureau, and the Schoharie County Chamber of Commerce. Commissioner Ball is still the owner and operator of Schoharie Valley Farms in Schoharie, New York, which consists of 200 acres and produces a wide range of vegetable crops, small fruits, and greenhouse crops. And just recently, earlier this week, in fact, Commissioner Ball was recently elected to be the president of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, where he will directly be able to engage at the federal level to impact and advocate federal farm policy. It's a critically important position in our nation's agricultural framework that we are very lucky to have someone from our region lead. We're also joined by my friend to the north, Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, Commissioner John LeBeau. Commissioner LeBeau is the son and grandson of farmers and was the general manager of his family Shrewsbury Nurseries. In addition to his knowledge and experience on the farm, Commissioner LeBeau has made a commitment to public service throughout his life, starting at age 18 when he was first elected to the Shrewsbury Representative Town Meeting. And I say that because some people think that I was young when I first got elected, but Commissioner LeBeau beats me by more than a couple of years. I point out both Commissioner Ball and Commissioner LeBeau's agricultural background and their public policy and engagement background, because I think those are two critically important aspects of having the right background to better serve our state's and our nation's agricultural industries. With that, Scott, I'll turn it back over to you so we can dig into the program here.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I wanted to ask each of the commissioners who are on this a few questions. You spoke eloquently about the scale of agriculture that's predominant in Connecticut, and I suspect is very important in both Massachusetts and New York. One of the questions that we had for you was, as we make this transition that we're about to make from the state and local to the federal and national, what is it that your states need from the upcoming Farm Bill or changes to the programs that you see coming down that you'd like to see to allow them to better serve the farmers of your state and to better serve building the kind of food system that you're trying to build in your state?
Well, thank you for that, Scott. And I, having served at USDA for 4 years, I'm very, or at least I used to be very knowledgeable about the farm programs that they had available. I'll say that there are some really great farm programs available, but they don't always capture the diversity of Connecticut farms. In Connecticut, our farmers, our small diversified operations, self-insure for the most part. They grow many crops. over many plantings to harvest throughout the year to take advantage of the growing season, the consumer's attention, and the opportunity to raise revenue during a limited period of the year. The Farm Service Agency has a number of great crop management or risk management tools for crops, but they're rather burdensome on the paperwork. And I've talked to farmers across the state who say, well, the amount of time it takes me to get this done, I could be doing something else, or the value of what I would receive is very limited. USDA has a great program in the Whole Farm Protection Program, which in its most ideal manner would protect the total revenue across all the crops. It's become really burdensome and really challenging for that to do what we needed to do for our small and diversified operations. A lot of paperwork requirements, again, a lot of reporting. If we could streamline that, I think we'll see those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 acre farms that are either just getting started or just about to launch have the better crop insurance tools that they need to make it through really difficult years like we've had in Connecticut this past summer. Risk management is an important tool to make sure that those new and beginning farmers, who the majority of which sell directly to consumers at farmers markets or farm stands, can withstand a year or maybe 2 of losses in those first critical years of becoming set up in their career path as a farmer and producer. So anything that we can do to streamline that, I think would make it a lot more available. The other piece that we have to take on as advocates in this industry is just letting people know that these tools are out there, directing them to our USDA service centers in the respective counties, and make sure that they start that conversation with USDA, whether it be at Rural Development or the Farm Service Agency or the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to figure out what tools are out there for them. I could go on for a while longer, but I know that Commissioner LeBeau and Commissioner Ball probably have much to add.
Well, I'll jump in here, Brian. Thank you so much, Scott. That's a very, very thoughtful and all-encompassing kind of question. You know, I think that in New York, we have such a wide range of specialty crop growers and a diversity in agriculture in our state that I think the most important thing I see is that we stay engaged and we stay relevant. I think that I see you've got an incredible agenda ahead of us here. And staying connected with USDA and making sure that our programs in our states align with what we see coming. And I have to say, I feel a high degree of optimism because Secretary Vilsack and his team has been constantly reaching out to commissioners, secretaries, and directors across the country. We met recently and heard from Secretary Vilsack just 2 days ago on this very subject. How do we have programs that are relevant? How do we have programs that fit the bill for what you're seeing and doing in your states? So I would just compliment my colleague from Connecticut for pretty accurately depicting, you know, some of the challenges in front of agriculture today. And I would just add that, you know, part of our mission, I think, needs to be when we see success in agriculture to make sure that that success translates into success in our rural communities.
Well, I think it's my turn now. Thank you for the invitation, and you know, great work that Farm Aid. We acknowledge the great work that Farm Aid does. To your question, Scott, as both my colleagues have mentioned, the Northeast states were different than some of the big square states and some of the agriculture that we conduct. Commissioner Ball just mentioned the term specialty crops, and that's certainly one that's on, I think, all of our minds. You know, in Massachusetts, we work to prioritize access to resources for the ag community through grants, technical assistance, and most recently, how to do ag in a global pandemic and adapt business models. And we've prioritized reaching EJ, BIPOC, low-income, socially disadvantaged, veteran, and traditionally underserved communities. But back to Commissioner Ball's reference to specialty crops. There are commodities, and then what we have in the Northeast are technically almost exclusively what's known as specialty crops. And there are grants for that. And I think those of us in the Northeast would request and suggest, as Secretary Fisher of New Jersey seems to be our leader in this area, to expand the funding, to expand the definition of what's a specialty crop, and actually to change the name, because a specialty crop sounds just too esoteric that people don't exactly understand what a specialty crop is. We have a very robust urban agriculture program in Massachusetts, and we're delighted to see that USDA is moving further and further into areas of urban agriculture. With what we're able to do, we see a great deal of demand. We've invested almost $3 million since 2014 in 95 projects, and could certainly use any help that the federal government could provide. Similarly, we've targeted a lot towards one step up from providing, we continue to provide grants to farms, but we're also reaching out to one step up to processors, to distributors, even to retailers, to try to enhance these operations that could increase the bottom lines of multiple farms. So any help we could get in that area as well would be helpful. And lastly, we initiated a food security infrastructure grant program since the pandemic began. It's the biggest agricultural and grant program we've ever had. And we're very delighted what that's done, but we had over 1,300 applications, and we were only able to fund slightly less than 400 of them. So those are all areas that I think any state in the country could use help with. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm going to read a question now from we've taken in from one of the farmers. Here's a question from Yvette Ruiz. My question is, what can the state of Connecticut do to ensure marginalized farmers and non-farmers alike have equitable, accessible, and true justice in the funds awarded, services and programs, and also the mental health needs of farmers in the area?
That's a great question, and one that we're working diligently on. I think the first way to ensure it is by doing what Yvette just did, asking questions, participating in the conversation, making your voice be heard. We can't guess all the needs and challenges that are out there, and when we do, quite honestly, we don't always get it right. And so having an engaged participant, an engaged community to make sure that we're tacking in the right way and addressing the right issues is really important. To that end, as I briefly mentioned, our diversity, equity, and inclusion program, we have 5 sub-working groups. And instead of the usual way you put together a working group where the commissioner and his staff or her staff put together a list of known entities and kind of seat those people, I wanted to blow that up. I wanted people from across the state whose voices usually aren't heard, who can't get to the legislative office building to participate in a public hearing, or who don't know that the department is headquartered on Columbus Boulevard in Hartford. So we did a call for nominations, self-nominations or colleague nominations to participate. And we had about 70 people from across the state sign up to participate in our DEI work group. We've got, as I mentioned before, 5 different working groups. We're able to seat 47 people, so nearly 4 dozen folks. And what I'm really impressed by, and what is important to me, having been around in this agricultural policy space for almost 2 decades now, many of these people aren't people I've ever met before or seen before. And so we are now, for the first time, for many of them, and for me and for the department, giving them a seat at the table, allowing them to bring their experiences, their challenges, and their knowledge to better craft policy, programming, outreach, and education. We can't do that without people there. Those meetings are public, and what we can do is, I think I can drop in the chat the schedule for the working groups and sub-working groups, and I would encourage Yvette to take a look at that, share it with your friends, get back to us with where we're right and where we're wrong, and make sure that we are doing right by this effort. It's a great question, and I think we're going to have a great outcome because we have so much engagement from the community. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Commissioners LeBeau or Ball, do you have any other comments on that? Let me go into another question from a farmer. This question is, farmers in Connecticut and the entire Northeast region are having a very difficult time processing beef, hogs, and sheep. The very few slaughterhouses and meat processors are booked out 6 to 9 months in many cases, and just getting an appointment to bring live animals in for processing is extremely difficult. What can be done to incentivize and facilitate the development of additional animal processing facilities?
Well, this is Commissioner Ball take the first crack at this one.
Sorry.
I mean, certainly this is a huge issue, Scott, that you've identified. When I joined our agency in 2015, we had 2 USDA slaughterhouses. We were able to increase that to 3, but still we have the very dramatic backlog, sometimes even more so than 6 to 9 months out. So we're looking at what opportunities we have within the state to do that. But obviously, to become a USDA certified slaughterhouse, it's a big lift. And, we can help perhaps with infrastructure, but some of the ongoing operational costs, and they're very important and they're very necessary, are very difficult economic hurdles for a business to handle. So I think assistance in that area, particularly targeting states where there's a scarcity of processing, would be enormously helpful.
Yeah, I'll weigh in just for a moment, Scott. Before I forget my manners, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. It blows my mind that we're talking about 36 years of this effort. But I would just add to what Commissioner LeBeau and Commissioner Hurlbert have mentioned. COVID-19 shone a very bright light on the food supply chain, and we saw some challenges there. We saw both ends of the food chain suffer. The farmers who lost half their markets, consumers that couldn't find product, and connecting those dots in a different way were so critical. We did identify such a huge need, especially in the Northeast, around processing capacity. We've known it's been there for some time. There's been a shortage for many years, as we saw it get consolidated in the Midwest and in the western part of the country. USDA has come out with quite a bit of funding to dedicate to this challenge, but I think our input's going to be necessary, and frankly, is going to be welcomed. I was able to be on a call with Deputy Secretary Jewel Bronaugh, who was a former colleague of ours, Commissioner of Agriculture from Virginia, before she took the #2 spot at USDA. And we talked about this specifically because there's a variety of challenges here. It's infrastructure, certainly. It's training, certainly. It's access to the USDA techniques for the firms that we do have already. But it's also an awful lot about workforce and training and labor. She was very open, and I know the Secretary is as well, to having this discussion. We just have to stay on this and rectify it best we can. We'll do that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And to finish up, I'd like to ask each of the 3 of you, if people who are on this session in this town hall want to follow up with your offices to follow up on the issues that we've been talking about, what's the best way for them to engage in what you're doing and to engage in this and be a part of the conversation on these important issues going forward?
Well, I would say that there's a number of ways to engage. And with COVID-19 moving a lot of things virtually, it's never been easier to engage at your time, from your home, and to capture a lot of events like these that would usually be in person at a place maybe many towns over from where you'd be in the middle of the day when you need to be out on the farm or at your off-farm job. So take advantage of the recorded meetings that happen. Take advantage of dialing in for 10 or 15 minutes at the meetings that are going to happen. Do a little web research as to what is going on. sign up for things like Connecticut's agriculture report, and get your, our weekly update as to what's happening. And we try to spotlight a farm. We try to highlight some local programs, but also federal programs. And that's an easy way to capture that information. The other thing that I'll speak, I think for myself, but definitely for everybody in the agricultural industry, nobody ends up in agriculture by accident. Right? Our staffs at our respective departments of agriculture are there because they love the people we serve, the industry that we serve. They love what they do. These folks are not your typical, thought of bureaucrats or public servants. They're a lot more engaged and dedicated. Make that first phone call. You're gonna reach somebody who's gonna give you a lot of information, or direct you to the right person who can give you information on your specific question. So some of it is passive, listen to what's going on, dial into webinars and forums, and some of it is active. Raise your hand, send an email, make a phone call, to be able to engage. But I think what you'll find is that there are a lot of people who are out there very interested to help. It's a close-knit community. We and these agencies know a lot about what else is going on, and our sister agencies or nonprofit or trade organizations that we can navigate and direct you to make sure that you're getting all of the support necessary to start. We all want more farms. We all want more successful farms. So nobody's going to turn you away or say no or say that's a terrible idea. We're going to help you figure it out. But I'll let Commissioner Ball-LeBeau jump in as well.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. That's a great summation. Every one of our departments of ag have a website. You can reach out to us very easily in that regard. And, our mission here in New York certainly was, we do a lot of regulation about plant and animal and land and water, but we're not just your inspector. We're here to be, for New York farmers, your voice in Albany on issues and your voice in Washington on issues. I would just, kind of reemphasize the critical nature of this. The COVID-19 pandemic, I mentioned, shown a very bright light on some of the challenges in our food supply system around the Northeast and around the world, frankly. But I think if there's a silver lining here, it's that, consumers and farmers alike in our region certainly recognize the value in having a resilient and a reliable food system that can respond in the event of a pandemic like this. We don't want to rely on another part of the world for our necessary food supply in the event of something like this. So I think we have an incredible opportunity going forward to connect dots here between one of the greatest growing communities, arguably in the country, and one of the most amazing marketplaces and diverse marketplaces anywhere in the world that we enjoy here in this part of the Northeast. I want to go back to one small thing that was mentioned earlier about the diversity in farms, crops raised, and specialty crops. The program crops, things like wheat, cotton, some of the grains, and corn. They certainly own most of the acreage in the country, and they're very critical crops to New York State and to the world. But specialty crops, as Commissioner LeBeau pointed out, are very important in this part of our country. And specialty crops, it should be noted, although the program crops own most of the land, specialty crops own more than 50% of the farm gate income. That's an important thing to point out. And, we're a little more than just a specialty niche kind of thing. This is the kind of things that we grow in the Northeast. These are the kind of things that really can bring a return to farmers. So thank you.
As my colleagues mentioned, and I won't repeat, we all have very transparent government models, and our meetings are open, and I am repeating, are available now electronically. We have a food action plan, the first new local food action plan in over 40 years that was accepted in 2015. And we have a very active food policy council composed of state agencies, legislators, but also practitioners. That's been pretty much our most widely attended meeting month after month, a quarter after quarter, where a lot of these issues are brought up, and having that three-pronged approach, having legislators, having the agencies, and having practitioners, we found to be an excellent avenue for raising issues that sometimes one of the prongs isn't totally aware of. So that is a fabulous avenue in Massachusetts, and we look forward to anyone who would like to join us at any of those virtual meetings.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, commissioners, for your time, for your efforts. Thank you very much for being with us today. We're very glad to be in your collective backyard and bringing Farm Aid here to this region. And we look forward to seeing you again. And again, thank you for your time and your efforts. And we'll all be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, we're going to pivot and begin to expand our scope out to a national perspective. We have now, we have remarks from several members of Congress who wanted to be here today, but were unable to. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska, Senators John Tester of Montana, and Chuck Grassley of Iowa, and Glenn Thompson of Pennsylvania. Let's hear their remarks.
Hi, this is Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today as we celebrate this year's Farm Aid Festival. You know, a long time ago, decades ago, in fact, I was an intern in the Department of Agriculture while I was in graduate school in Washington, D.C. And one of my jobs was to do a summary of the first Farm Aid Festival that was going to occur during the farm crisis of the 1980s. That would then be given to the president at the time. So I'm happy decades later to actually give you an update of what we've been doing, and to thank you as well for continuing this long tradition of trying to raise both money and awareness to help family farmers throughout America. I'm the ranking member of the House Appropriations Agriculture Subcommittee. As in that position, I am greatly appreciative of what you've done. Particularly for family farmers, so that they have the opportunity to survive and thrive in the coming years. Agriculture is a mainstay of America's economy. The vastness of our land, our ingenuity, and our technological prowess allow our nation to provide the most abundant, low-cost, nutritious, and diverse array of foods in the entire world. These conditions allow for some of the most vulnerable people with the lowest incomes in the country to actually purchase better, healthier food. And the farmers who make this success possible deserve our support. While it's critical to help farmers today, we must focus on the future. With the average age of the farmer in the U.S. continuing to climb to about the age of 58 years old, we must create an environment that is welcoming to new and beginning farmers. I'd also like to mention the Farm of the Future initiative that's designed to enhance efficiency, regenerative capacity, and create new forms of small niche scale agriculture that marry high tech with high touch, the farm to the family, the rural to the urban, and the farm to the table. I believe this has great potential to help future generations of farmers. Agriculture has a unique ability to unite across political and social and economic divides. We have the opportunity to expand the traditional ag family with innovative initiatives to add value to commodity groups, augment specialty crops, expand local economies, and tap into the growing trends of knowing where your food comes from. Thank you again for all that you're doing to promote family farmers, and I look forward to working together as we pursue mutual goals.
Thank you for inviting me to speak with you, and I wished I could be there in person to enjoy the festivities. And thank you all for all of the work that you've done to support family farmers in Montana and across this nation. Farm Aid has a long tradition of bringing farmers and farm advocates together to strengthen family farms and our food systems. And as a Senate's only working farmer and its only organic farmer, I know firsthand how impactful your work really is. With your help, I'm working hard in the U.S. Senate to level the playing field for producers nationwide. We've seen market consolidation create anti-competitive prices in the meatpacking industry for way too long. And that's why I'm fighting to pass my bipartisan Meatpacking Special Investigator Act. This bill will make the industry more competitive, not only by putting teeth into the Packers and Stockyard Act, giving producers and consumers better prices, and strengthening our food security by decentralizing the industry. And it's time that consumers knew where their meat was coming from also. My bipartisan American Beef Labeling Act will reinstate mandatory country of origin labeling. And it'll give consumers increased transparency while leveling the playing field for our ranchers. I'm confident that folks across the nation would prefer to buy beef that was raised in the United States of America, and this legislation will give them that choice. It's also been a difficult year for producers in Montana and across the nation as we faced historic drought and wildfires. I've been on the farm for 44 years. This was our 44th harvest. This is the worst year by far that my wife Charla and I have had on the farm. Climate change is happening. It's here, and we need to be bold to combat it. That's why I'll fight to make sure that the final reconciliation package includes climate-smart provisions to tackle the issue head-on. American farmers feed the world and are absolutely critical to maintaining our food systems at home. I'm grateful for the work that you do to support us. Thank you again, and I hope to join you in person next time.
As a lifelong family farmer who has also worked for 6 decades representing Iowans in state and federal government, I wear my rural roots as a badge of honor. I believe it's important for farmers to have a seat at the policy-making tables. Only 2% of American population shoulders the responsibility for growing enough food to feed the entire U.S. population. Our agrarian-based heritage has experienced rapid transformation in the last generation. Fewer Americans, even in Iowa, have a direct link to living or working on a farm. And most likely, due to affordable abundance of food, not enough people appreciate that food security is directly tied to national security. Food security extends beyond national sovereignty. American agriculture and the farmers and workers and businesses along the supply chain anchors the U.S. economy and increasingly strengthens U.S. energy independence as well. The pandemic has shed light on many problems within the Packers and Stockyards division and its inability to preserve our nation's beef supply chain. As the first link in our food supply chain, farmers and ranchers assume incredible risk with each planting and animal raised, but their livelihood depends on receiving a fair price. That's why I believe it's important that the Department of Agriculture, Department of Justice, and the Federal Trade Commission be engaged and very aggressive in policing anti-competitive activity. A year ago, last March, I wrote to Attorney General Barr and Secretary Perdue calling for an investigation about possible illegal practices in the cattle industry. I have a bill with Senator Tester that creates a special investigator for competitive matters within the USDA's Packers and Stockyards division. That bill would address anti-competitive practices and enforce our competition laws. I also have legislation pending to address the concerns some of my colleagues and I have about cash trade in the cattle market. Most recently, I was pleased to hear Secretary Vilsack's announcement about restoring the Packers and Stockyards Act to fight unfair practices and rebuild a competitive playing field for farmers and ranchers, as well as President Biden's support for a legislative solution to cattle market reform. As the Senate Ag Committee works to reauthorize mandatory price reporting, it's my goal, along with many other senators, to make meaningful improvements to price discovery and transparency in cattle markets. We cannot delay. This cannot wait until next year or the next Farm Bill. Now, for you, have a great rest of your time at your town hall, and thank you for this opportunity to join you. Also, remember, reach out to my office if I can ever be of assistance.
And I see that Senator Smith has joined us. And so for this next session, welcome, Senator Smith. And for this next session, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Niaz Dori. Niaz currently serves as the Executive Director of the National Family Farm Coalition, as well as the Coordinating Director for the North American Marine Alliance. She's been a community organizer for over 30 years. Throughout her career, she has recognized the similarities between family farmers' fight for a more just and ecologically responsible land-based food system, and that of community-based fishermen fighting to fix the broken sea-based food system. Take over, Niaz.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Farm Aid, for organizing this on behalf of National Family Farm Coalition. I'm happy to be with you all today. And welcome, Senator Smith. I am honored to have you and a couple of other guests here over the next hour with us. And without any further ado, I would like to invite you. I know you have a short, brief statement for us, and we have a couple of questions for you once we hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Niaz, and so glad to be with you. I want to thank the Family Farm Coalition and Farm Aid for organizing this, and it's great to be a part of it, and I'm honored to be on also with Senator Stabenow and Secretary Vilsack shortly, and also it's great to hear my colleague on the Ag Committee, Senator Grassley. So I'm a Minnesota senator, and I start from the core idea that family farmers in Minnesota are the bedrock of Minnesota's economy. Family farming is part of our history, but it also has got to be part of our future. Family farmers are growing the food and the fuel and the fiber that make America work, that feed America, and that provide the economic impetus for small towns and rural places all over my state and all over the country. To put it into perspective, in Minnesota, family farmers and farming in general are responsible for 340,000 jobs and over $90 billion in economic activity. But the question is, who is benefiting from that economic activity? And that gets me to the first issue that we have got to talk about when it comes to agriculture, which is the issue of increasing concentration and how that is impacting family farmers. And yeah, I hope we have a chance to talk more about that, Niaz, as we have our questions. I think that COVID has revealed something that we all knew before COVID, which is that increasing concentration in agriculture, especially in meat processing, means that more and more, just fewer and fewer companies, 4 big companies control well over 80% of the processing capacity in this country. And what that means is that they are making more money and family farmers are making much, much less money. Layer on top of that what happened with COVID, with the concentrations in meat processing that meant when COVID hit a processing facility that they had to shut down, the tragic impacts of that on producers who in some cases in Minnesota ended up having to liquidate their herds, not to mention the impact of the workers in those big processing facilities. We have got to do better than this. And I do believe that there is bipartisan support for going after this anti-competitive behavior. Secretary Vilsack and President Biden have taken good steps, and I'm collaborating with my both Democrats and Republicans to go after this. I also want to just say a word, especially having a chance to talk with you, Naz, about the Family Farm Coalition, about how we have to support and lift up small farmers and beginning farmers, and also farmers of color who are growing the food that we need to eat. Too many places in rural America are literally food deserts because there is no way to connect the food that farmers are growing with the consumers in their very own communities. That is just unacceptable. And I have pressed and urged Secretary Vilsack, who is extremely open to this, to looking at how the USDA needs to shift around its priorities to really truly support small farmers, beginning farmers, and farmers of color. This is a culture shift that needs to happen in the USDA, and I'm confident that Secretary Vilsack understands that. The last thing I just want to mention briefly, I have to mention it this year in particular, is the urgent need to take action on climate, something that Minnesota farmers understand extremely well. You don't have to tell Minnesota about the realities of climate change when we see it in fires in the boundary waters, of drought-stricken farm fields throughout the state, and the urgent impacts today and the costs of climate change. I know that agriculture in Minnesota and around the country can lead the way in terms of climate-friendly processes and strategies, which is going to be good for resilience as well as extremely good for the kinds of additional work we need to do around carbon sequestration. So I am excited to have this conversation with you and to be in partnership with all of you. I look forward to talking with you a little bit, Niaz, and answering any questions that people have. And I'm just grateful for the work that you are doing to stand up for family farmers all over this country.
Thank you so much, Senator Smith. And I was remiss not to actually tell our viewers a little bit about you. You've been in your seat since 2018. You currently serve as the chair of the Senate Agriculture Committee's Rural Development and Energy Subcommittee. And you've worked really hard to expand broadband, especially in tribal communities, and have fought against anti-competitive practices, which you just talked about a little bit, and pushed for more transparency within the meatpacking industry. And I've also worked on behalf of farmers of color, and I've championed the Farm Bill, worked on behalf of farmers of color that you've championed the Farm Bill specifically aimed at helping beginning and underserved farmers. So thank you for all that work. You mentioned climate change, and actually our first question is about climate-related issues, and it comes from Jennifer Taylor, who's in Florida at the moment. Unfortunately, because of broadband issues and connectivity, she couldn't join us. We all know the problem with rural broadband. So she sent a question that she's asked me to read to you, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
And you can see Jennifer's photo here. Good afternoon. It's such an honor to speak with you and to participate in this event. I'm Jennifer Taylor. My husband, Ron, and I have an organic small farm in rural Georgia, where we grow organic fruit and vegetables all year using organic agroecology farm practices to grow our produce, to build healthy soils, and support healthy environments and communities. We farm as well as offer trainings for aspiring organic farmers and often provide learning farm tours to teach others about the benefits of agriculture and our work. In addition to farming, I'm an associate professor at Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University in Tallahassee, where I developed our statewide small farm program that focuses on underserved farming population and organic farming systems. Addressing climate issues is important to me, as should be to anyone who farms or has anything to do with farming. That's why we focus a lot of attention on building healthy soil, as we believe organic farming system practices offer key factors in mitigating the climate crisis. But the USDA needs to do more. We simply cannot confront the climate crisis without radically transforming the way we produce and distribute food. So she has two questions for you. One, what steps are you ready to take to reform the core programs that touch all aspects of our food systems, from agriculture to fisheries to supply chain, to ensure we realize the fundamental changes we need? And the second question is, how will you work with us to enable Black, Indigenous farmers and farmers of color, as well as small resource poor farmers, individuals socially disadvantaged farmers and their families, to have a seat at the table, to not only be part of the solution, but beneficiaries of programs that grow thriving, resilient BIPOC small farmers and promote healthy Black and Indigenous people of color communities and livelihood?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Niaz, and thank you, Jennifer, for that question. First, let me just observe that you're making a really important connection between small farmers, organic farmers, food farmers, and climate. And those two things go directly together in my mind. Farmers that are practicing biodynamic farming and organic farming understand so well the work that we have to do to make sure that we're thinking about soil health at the core of everything that we do. And if we are growing food in community and not shipping that food all over the country or all over the world, then that of course is going to have an impact on the carbon pollution that we are not creating because of that more locally centered activity. You know, I remember when I'm going to visit my own grandmother who lived in farm country in northern Indiana, where in those days there was a processor and a meat locker in every single community, and now the concentration in that area has completely shifted the way the food system works, and it's had a direct impact on those individual and local producers. The core problem that we have to address is that many, many USDA programs, just as you suggested, are geared towards large farmers and commodity farmers and do not have the flexibility and the capacity to really serve the needs of small farmers and food-based farmers. And that is something that we have to change if we're going to support those small farmers and diverse and socially disadvantaged farmers at the same time that we're trying to address climate issues. And so as we approach the next Farm Bill, I know that this is something that's going to be uppermost on my mind. I want to also just acknowledge that as we talk about climate and energy, that clean energy is rural energy. And there is such an opportunity in agriculture as we diversify towards more clean energy sources to also diversify farm income streams as we are able to kind of build out more wind and solar in rural places. The last thing that you said, and of course I'm so thinking about you coming from Georgia, where you are, we are also blessed to have Reverend Raphael Warnock serve in the Senate along with John Ossoff, but I'm thinking especially of Reverend Warnock because he serves with me on the Agriculture Committee. And to understand and to address directly the systemic racism that has done so much historic damage to farmers in this country, especially Black farmers who are completely disenfranchised over the 100 years from Reconstruction to 100 years later from their farmlands, and to take direct action to repair that, which is one of the reasons why I've been such a strong supporter of Senator Warnock's efforts in this area. In my own home state of Minnesota, we have a really lively and diverse and productive group of farmers that are Hmong farmers, that are Latino farmers, that are African diaspora farmers, and of course, Native farmers. We have to make sure that the FDA programs are serving their needs and are doing what needs to be done to make sure that they have a real opportunity in their communities.
Thank you, Senator Smith. I just want to remind our viewers to please don't forget the Q&A is there for you to submit any questions that you have. Speaking of your home state, Senator Smith, our next question actually comes from Bonnie Haugen, who is a farmer in Minnesota, and we're going to see a short video from Bonnie here.
Sheena Smith, thank you for your concern and interest in climate issues and the agriculture communities. I'm Bonnie Haugen, grazing dairy farmer in southeastern Minnesota. Our farm business has 230 acres, 150 dairy cows, and we are greatly affected by climate change causing drought or too much rain too fast. In 2019, only 17% of EQIP applications in Minnesota were funded. Most contracts support CAFOs. Factory farms are not the solution to climate change. I strongly believe we need more funding for the small, mid-sized farms that use practices that really do make a difference on climate, like perennial grazing. Climate, conservation practices, funding, and social economic justice issues are intertwined. Senator Smith, through your role on the Ag Committee, can you make a commitment to fund EQIP and CSP so more BIPOC farmers, beginning farmers, and small to mid-scale farmers like me are able to afford conservation practices which will help us do our part to change climate change? Thank you, Bonnie Haugen.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Bonnie, for that great question. And you absolutely have my commitment to support CSP and EQIP and other programs that really are giving farmers support to do the kind of soil health practices and other conservation practices that are going to be good for your farms and also good for the big fight that we have ahead of us and we're in the middle of on climate change. So this is exactly the kind of policy that we need to support and expand as we look at the next Farm Bill. And let me also just say, I've heard from a lot of people related to this. I've heard from a lot of folks in Minnesota as we are starting to look at sort of creating some of these market-based strategies that involve farmland and carbon sequestration, that it's extremely important that those, I think sometimes the farmers that I've spoken to in Minnesota feel like this is happening to them, that it is actually giving them less power, not more power over the steps and the actions that they want to take to contribute to our efforts around the urgent climate crisis. So this is something else that I think we have to look at really carefully and make sure that farmers and producers are in the forefront of our discussions about how to fix those problems.
That's right. And we hear that a lot from farmers who feel that a lot of these conversations are happening in very opaque environments, lack of transparency, and they worry that ultimately they're going to once again become victims of a process as opposed to beneficiaries or contributors to one. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind moving forward.
Could I just say that I came to the Senate in 2018, just as we were working on the Farm Bill, and I'm really grateful for the leadership of Senator Stabenow, who has been so instrumental on this. What I did was to create a broad-based and diverse working group to advise me as we were putting together our policy ideas for that Farm Bill. And it, of course, included the traditional commodity groups and the livestock groups, but it also included great organizations like the Land Stewardship Project and organizations that work on food hubs and the Hmong Farmers Association and Latino Farmers Association and small farmers, so that we could truly get the kind of diverse input that we needed. Now, we weren't able to get everything done that amazing group supported, but I expect to do that exact same kind of approach again as we look towards the next Farm Bill and as we continue to wrestle with these really important policy issues.
Yeah, that's right. We have one question for you, Senator Smith, from Denisa Livingston, who is from Fruitland, New Mexico, and Navajo Nation. She is a community health advocate and food and health justice organizer for the Dene Community Advocacy Alliance. She asks, or first she says, and then she asks, transforming the dominant food systems is an urgent issue. Amongst those negatively impacted are indigenous communities. Their systems of food generation are sustainable, equitable, and resilient. Their knowledge, governance systems, and resource management strategies and ways of living are essential. They're the keepers of the vast majority of the world's food plants and seeds. What are the current efforts to support the Native American Seeds Protection Act of 2019? Can this act be prioritized to be addressed? What are your priorities when assisting Native farmers and growers to protect their food systems and seeds so they can exercise their inherent sovereignty?
I so appreciate that question. It reminds me that, in addition to serving on the Agriculture Committee, I also serve on the Indian Affairs Committee in the Senate. And there is not nearly enough attention paid to the connection between systemic racism and historic trauma, the opportunities for Native people to fully express the concept of food sovereignty, and then how that can manifest itself right here, right now, as we work to build much better and stronger supports for Native food systems, certainly through the Department of Agriculture, but through all of our processes. I'm thinking about visiting Minnesota's Dakota and Ojibwe nations and seeing how, with the assistance from the CARES Act funding and other COVID relief funding, that these tribal nations have been able to make really important and exciting leaps forward in building out food-based entrepreneurial activity and farming activity and develop opportunities for tribal members on tribal land. That, to me, is exactly the kind of thing that we should be supporting. But again, this cannot be led from Washington, D.C. It must be led by Native people at the local level, and it is up to me and others in Washington to hear that and to see that and to make sure that that leadership is brought forward. Too often, when we talk about these issues in Washington, we pay such short shrift to the fundamental treaty value of consultation, and it is sort of an afterthought and not the beginning thought of the work that we have to do. And so that is the way I work to make this happen, and will pledge to do everything I can to continue to put that at the forefront. And I also have to say, I was born and raised, at least partially, in New Mexico, and so it is wonderful to hear a voice from the Navajo Nation.
Well, and we wish we could hear Denisa's voice as well. But again, we're dealing with broadband and connectivity issues and unable to have her with us directly today. Well, Senator Smith, we really appreciate the time you've spent with us and the work that you have been doing and that you are committing to doing. And we look forward to the farmers that are watching this, the farmers that are part of our coalition and others to follow up with you on some of these commitments and some of these ideas that you're pursuing as you work with us to a more sovereign food system that's much more resilient and allows us to eat good food and have it be available to communities who need it most. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next with us, our next guest today is Senator Debbie Stabenow, who is a strong advocate for farmers and families in her home state all across the country. Senator Stabenow serves as the chairwoman of the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. She's a champion of efforts to diversify agriculture, develop climate-smart agriculture practices, and get fresh fruits and vegetables on the tables of American families. Senator Stabenow has a long track record of supporting new and beginning farmers and ensuring all farmers have the tools they need to succeed. Through the COVID-19 crisis, she's led the effort to improve the food supply chain, expand nutrition assistance, and ensure small farmers and local markets are getting their fair share of relief. Thank you so much for joining us today, Senator Stabenow. It's nice to have you. And once we hear from you, we have some questions both from your district and outside that we would like to share with you. Welcome.
Wonderful. Well, it's so great to be with you, and a special hello to all of my Michigan friends that are here. And so I appreciate so much all of what you do. The advocacy over the years is just extraordinary. Farm Aid and your engagement. I also want to say special thank you to the support of Farm Aid and Willie Nelson's active support when we passed the American Rescue Plan and included long overdue debt relief for farmers of color, including our tribes. And we're now addressing legal challenges, as you know, but I've been working very hard with colleagues and many to make sure that we are providing critical support as part of our Build Back Better budget. So we've had to reconstruct a few things, but very much committed to making sure that those who need support and help are getting it. And so that's very much a priority for me. You know, I've been focused for years on increasing our local and regional food systems and expanding organic agriculture and tackling the climate crisis as we go through all this process with nature-based solutions, which frankly, I think are underestimated in terms of reducing carbon pollution and creating, of course, more sustainable food systems. But our 2018 Farm Bill had the most comprehensive climate smart ag policies to date, but we can do so much more. And that's why I'm leading the part of the Build Back Better budget that focuses on agriculture and nutrition and forestry. And it's a very big step. It's an aggressive step to move forward. We want to create this opportunity for resources to empower family farmers to address the climate crisis. And we have the biggest investment in the budget that I proposed and that we're partnering on with the House Chairman, the biggest investment in conservation since the Dust Bowl, investing in popular, effective programs for farmers large and small. And this will be an investment well beyond what I had originally asked for from the administration, a $50 billion investment in climate smart agriculture and forestry. And this will be well above that when we include all of the sustainable forestry efforts, regenerative agriculture, so critical as we move forward and talk about local and urban agriculture and more resiliency, because we're not just talking about big food enterprises or big farm enterprises, but what we can do locally together, and sustainable forestry and research. We have really important research to do about what else we can be doing. We also in the budget have significant dollars to restore our forests, to protect them against severe wildfire, to do it the right way, and to plant trees on both public and private land to protect from extreme heat, including in our cities. This is so important, as you know, urban communities and cities where we need to have more green spaces, more trees. This is an issue of extreme heat, as well as a whole range of other issues that have related to disparities and what's happening in our cities. And so this is part of the budget that we've put together as well. We also have a huge investment in rural communities and through a new rural partnership program. But basically, we're including a generational investment in climate research and infrastructure and cooperative extension and scholarships for students, reaching out to so many of our communities of color and colleges and universities, and a new climate conservation corps for thousands and thousands of young people to be engaged in doing the work we need to do in a more sustainable way. So that has been a primary focus for me in the last bit. I'm very focused on what we do on the climate crisis, very focused. But let me also say that as part of where we go in agriculture, that a big part of this is understanding and doing something about the concentration in ag production. And right now, with all that concentration, farmers have fewer options. We need fairness and transparency for farmers of all sizes, all backgrounds. I did a hearing a few weeks ago on the cattle markets, and we have basically 4 huge meat processing enterprises in the United States, 2 that are foreign owned. And what we need is very much to be focusing on small regional operations, reducing the concentration, which frankly creates more risk. And we saw it in COVID with COVID outbreaks and when the supply chain breaks down.
That's true.
So that's very much what we're doing. And between the end of the year budget we put together and the American Rescue Plan, I was able to get $5.5 billion to protect food systems and farm workers, another very important piece of this, and to address the gaps in the food supply chain. So I know Secretary Vilsack now is rolling out the dollars and the investments from that, which is very, very important. And I would also just say Michigan is one of the most diverse states in the country in terms of what we grow, large and small, second only to California. And I know that our local food operations provide an essential and sustainable connection between farmers and food. So when we go into the next Farm Bill, I look forward to continuing to work with you. My priority is to make sure that we have policies and programs that work for everybody. It doesn't matter what you grow, where you live, who you are, how many acres you have. The big fight for me in this last Farm Bill as well was creating an urban agriculture office, which was a fight that should not have been as tough as it was, but it was, but we won it. And so I really look forward to working with you on the issues that really matter, and appreciate Farm Aid for providing what is a really unique and powerful platform. And I'm looking forward for you to continue to lift up your voice, and I'm proud to be your partner. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. Our first question actually is from your home state of Michigan, from someone who apparently knows you well enough that during my conversation with them, he kept referring to you as Senator Debbie. So I'll read the question because, again, we have connectivity problems in rural America, and Dennis Kellogg.
Broadband, as you know,
That's right.
Broadband.
That's right.
Got to get
equity, because we can have broadband, and if it doesn't get to the right people, we still don't have haven't solved the problem.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm going to read Dennis's question for you. And here we go. Dennis Kellogg, a 6th generation, and you can see Dennis and his grandson in the picture here. Dennis Kellogg, a 6th generation Michigan farmer and a member of the Michigan Farmers Union. We've been farming on our family's homestead here in Ithaca since the 1850s. My son will be the 7th generation to take over Kellogg Farm. We grow 200 acres of soybeans and raise about 40 heads of cattle. We grow our own forage crops to feed our cattle. The last few years have been very difficult, especially when all the government services were shut down, but we're doing our best. I've been learning a lot about carbon markets lately, and I've been talking about them with a lot of our other farmers. Everything we hear has made us justifiably skeptical. It feels like another system that's not transparent and will ultimately end up being unfair to family farmers. I know that you've been supportive of carbon markets, but I'm worried that Michigan farmers like me are going to get left behind, and the beneficiaries will once again be big agriculture. I'm worried that while we're being asked to make a long-term commitment, that commitment will not be reflected in how the farmers are rewarded when it comes to the administration of such markets. We worry that the companies, which will likely end up being investment firms or companies who are already polluting, will see these markets as a way to get themselves off the hook from having to do anything about their own impact on the climate. Senator Stabenow and I have 3 questions for you. First, how are you going to ensure that any carbon market plans are transparent and fair for diversified small and mid-scale farmers? Second, how will you work to not only protect, but also increase resources for existing conservation and research programs that must also be part of the climate solution to make sure all farmers have a seat at that table? And finally, how will you make sure that those who pollute the most and have the biggest impact on our climate don't use having invested in carbon markets as a way to get themselves off the hook when it comes to contributing to meaningful reductions?
Great questions. Good to see you. Just thank you for those questions. Let me take them sort of maybe in reverse order. There's 3 important questions, and there's been a lot of justifiable concern, but yet not understanding really what we're doing, what the USDA is intent on doing through actually creating a voluntary operation, a voluntary system that farmers can choose, not choose, in terms of participating in carbon markets and making sure they actually work for farmers. That's the whole point. I mean, right now they're designed by Wall Street. They're designed by businesses. But the people that we're all worried about, they're doing it anyway. They're doing it anyway. And so this is not about them. This is about making sure the family farmer and others who want to be able to create revenue from doing the right thing in terms of conservation, regenerative agriculture, other operations, forestry, and so on, that they can participate too. That is our whole point. And so I would start there and say, this is also not a cap and trade system where a polluter can buy credits and then still pollute. That would take passage by Congress. It would be overseen by the EPA. That is a different kind of emissions trading system where EPA would say, you have to meet this cap, but you can do it by buying carbon credits. This has nothing to do with that. Somebody who pollutes, we're not trying to help polluters or let people get off the hook. This is about rewarding farmers of all sizes, particularly small and medium-sized operations that aren't able to, they're not the big guys, so they can't be doing this right now, and provide information and support and resources to be part of the climate solution. So number one, this idea that somebody's somehow gonna buy your carbon credits and get off the hook has nothing to do with what we are doing through our Growing Climate Solutions Act that we have passed in the Senate overwhelmingly to give USDA the ability to design something for farmers. Secondly, when I talked about the budget and the investments in conservation, you're absolutely right. I mean, in our budget, I have $28 billion, the largest investment ever in our conservation efforts for farmers. And this is part of that. Growing Climate Solutions is about ramping up current conservation, ramping up, by the way, sustainable forestry. A big piece of this is what we can do with trees and forests. And so it's about that. And then if farmers want to do this, don't have to do it. If you want to say, I'm doing really aggressive work and I would like to talk to an expert at the USDA that could tell me how to measure what I'm doing, how to quantify it, and give it sort of the stamp of approval. So you could then, if you want to, go into carbon markets and try to raise revenue, try to sell your carbon credits. All your choice. It's all your choice. Right now, what happens though, it's designed by Wall Street. The big guys are the ones that benefit. And the truth of the matter is, folks will come out to a farm. I mean, I have had farmers in Michigan say to me, it's like the wild, wild west. Somebody comes out and tells them, you do this or you do that. I got a deal for you. There's no transparency. There's no accountability. And the whole point is to have the USDA say, these are the folks that know what they're doing. This is the information that's the right information. If you choose to take that step, then here's what you do. And you know there will be openness and transparency and that somebody's not trying to hustle you, basically. And so that's the whole point of Growing Climate Solutions. And I appreciate, there are others that are saying it's more than it is. Our bill is a process bill. We set up an advisory committee with a very diverse group of folks in agriculture. And they will oversee with USDA how we go ahead. But I want to make sure our farmers have a shot to be not only, getting more money on conservation and forestry, but have the information and the tools and the trust that they can participate in these markets if they want to, and they're not shut out by the big guys. So that's the whole point of what we're trying to do.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for digging deep into that with us for the time that we had. We have our next question from Jeannie Alderson, who's a farmer from Montana and part of the Northern Plains Resource Council.
Hi.
She's coming by video, so hang tight.
My name is Jeannie Alderson. I'm a fourth-generation rancher from Boerne, Montana. Together with my family, I own and operate Bones Brothers Ranch, which is a cow-calf operation. Senator Stabenow, the USDA has announced a series of initiatives to address competition, especially in livestock markets, including rulemaking on the Packers and Stockyards Act. In the past, similar initiatives have been blocked by riders in farm bills and appropriations. How will you act to prevent such riders from passing and protect the important competition initiatives from being blocked by Congress?
Great idea. There's always a push. Great question. There's always a push-pull. First, I would say, in the past, when we had former Republican colleagues chairing the Agriculture Committee in the last 4 years, they didn't want to even do a hearing on cattle markets. I've done the first hearing in a long, long time to look at all of this and provided the funding for the secretary, who I know can speak to this, to be able to do the things that we both want him to do. And so will there be a struggle? Will there be those that try to stop it? Yeah, probably. The difference is who's in the majority right now in the House and the Senate. And the president is strongly with us in being able to address all of these things. So, always a struggle as we move, and every single piece that I've been involved in writing farm bills over the years, where it's sort of big enterprises versus small, or, local, regional versus big, and all the kinds, it's always a battle. But we have, even though there's a lot more to do, we've made step forwards, and I'm very hopeful that we've got the right people in the right place with funding right now to offer some opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. Funding seems to be at the crux of most of these debates. We have one question coming to you. Again, I'm going to read it because broadband. It comes from California and says, "Hi, I'm Javier Zamora, owner of JSM Organic Farms in Royal Oaks, California. I'm a second-generation farmer and grew up helping my dad farm in Mexico and cultivated my piece of land in middle school to learn about the importance of agriculture. We know about the situation with debt forgiveness for socially disadvantaged farmers passed in the American Rescue Plan, and that those payments are likely tied up in the courts for a significant amount of time. What is the status of other legislation in Congress, including the Justice for Black Farmers Act and the Relief for America's Small Farmers Act, excuse me, that could address the needs of Black, Indigenous, and other farmers of color, and other farmers who were completely overlooked in many of the COVID response programs. And as a follow-up, what do you believe is the most important thing we need to do in the next Farm Bill to advance racial equity?
Javier, thank you for that. And let me first just say that as we advance equity, racial equity, fairness in the Farm Bill, it shouldn't be just one thing. It should be throughout. So that's how I approach it in terms of the policies going forward, is that we need to be looking at every program with that light. And you're right. It was a very high priority for me personally when we did the American Rescue Plan to put in the debt relief that we did. And I'm so pleased to have new members of my agriculture committee, from Senator Cory Booker to Senator Raphael Warnock to Senator Ben Ray Lujan, who are avid, leaders and supporters on this. There have been court cases, but we've taken a look at what would be necessary to revise what we want to do in a way that is still very significant, and working with Senator Gillibrand, who has one of the bills you were talking about, Senator Booker's broader bill. We actually put $1 billion towards beginning to operationalize that into the rescue plan also. And so you will see as we move forward now, we've been working closely with Justice Department, USDA, and so on, and how we revise what we did in a way that will meet the tests of the court, but still, maintain the goals of what we want to do around equity, and broadening that out to small farmers in general and so on, but still being focused on impoverished areas and in parts of the country that are most in need. So we believe we will have something substantial, very substantial, that's revised, and I believe meet the tests in terms of court challenges, and have that in the budget that we're doing right now.
Well, thank you for that. I know a lot of us are looking forward to seeing this issue resolved and the promises made good on, that farmers can actually get some debt relief. Thank you so much for joining us today, Senator Stabenow. I know there will be follow-ups from various farmers from around the country as we wrap this up, and they can get in touch with you, I'm sure, directly. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Our final guest for this period of time is Secretary Tom Vilsack. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat, who was nominated by President Biden to serve as the United States Secretary of Agriculture, a role in which he served for 8 years under President Barack Obama. As leader of the USDA within the Obama administration, the Secretary worked hard to strengthen the American agriculture economy, build vibrant rural communities, and create new markets for innovation in rural America. Prior to his appointment, he served 2 terms as the governor of Iowa, served in the Iowa State Senate, and as the mayor of Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Prior to returning to USDA this time, he served as president and CEO of U.S. Dairy Export Council, as well as a strategic advisor to Colorado State University's Food and Water Initiatives. Welcome, Secretary Vilsack.
Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you. I know you have a brief statement for us, and we have a bunch of questions for you. So why don't we get started?
Very good. Yeah, I really do consider it an honor to be invited to visit with you today. I know what Farm Aid is all about. I know that Farm Aid is a group of individuals who are committed to underserved producers throughout America. And I want you to know that the Department of Agriculture stands with you in our efforts to bring equity and inclusion into the Department of Agriculture. Senator Stabenow mentioned the debt relief initiative. And in addition to that, there's also an effort on the part of USDA to figure out ways in which we can extend significantly technical assistance, market access, and land access to underserved producers. We just recently announced the formulation and development of an equity commission that will be looking carefully from the outside in at the way in which USDA has been operated to determine how we can remove any barriers that currently exist to fair and inclusive treatment for underserved producers. We also are doing an internal review as well. And we're looking forward to creating new and innovative ways to create market access. I'll give you one example. We recently announced a temporary emergency food assistance program and directed for the first time resources be directly connected to and provided to opportunities to purchase from underserved and historically underserved producers. $200 to $300 million of opportunity has now been created through that emergency food program. And we're also looking at ways in which we can work with local and regional distribution systems to better support local and regional producers, which oftentimes are small, smaller sized farming operations, to get them an opportunity. I also know that Farm Aid is a group of individuals who are committed to having a competitive and fair market for producers large and small. And I want you to know we are aggressively pursuing an effort consistent with the president's direction to create a more competitive market. Mention was made of the Packers and Stockyards activities, which are underway. We recently provided guidance in terms of our approach towards the Packers and Stockyards Act, which indicates that we're going to use it as a tool to address a number of issues in terms of fairness. So whether it's discriminatory practices, unfair practices, retaliatory practices, we want to be on the side of farmers in the utilization of Packers and Stockyards. We also have recently announced 2 additional studies to create better price discovery. We'll continue to work with the Department of Justice on questions and issues that they have concerning antitrust. And of course, we're excited about the opportunity to expand significantly support for small and very small processing capacity in this country and creating new capacity so that farmers have multiple ways in which they can market their cattle, their hogs, the poultry, so that we have a more competitive and fair market. And lastly, I know that there's been a lot of resources provided under pandemic assistance in the past, and sometimes there were growers and producers that were left out of those efforts. We've attempted to utilize the resources provided by Congress under the American Rescue Plan and additional COVID relief plans to try to address some of the inequities and some of the areas that were not totally supported in the previous administration. Recently, we announced additional resources for contract growers, specialty crop growers, our dairy farmers, with a particularly focus and emphasis on some of the smaller dairy operations, as well as those who had to euthanize animals because of a lack of a market during the pandemic. We'll continue to look for ways in which we can provide help and assistance to small and mid-sized producers so that we have great diversity not only in producers, but in methods of production, in size of operations. That is the great strength of American agriculture. We're also keenly aware that Farm Aid is an area that is supportive of our organic producers. And again, we are looking for ways in which we can support more fully that part of agriculture, whether it's the origin of livestock rule, or whether it's a new poultry livestock rule, or whether it's providing additional resources to make it easier to become certified and remain certified, or whether it's providing transition assistance as people make the decision to transition from conventional operations to organic operations. We want to be at USDA that's supportive of organic. There's an awful lot I can talk about, but I think it would be better if I stop now and spend the rest of the time responding to as many questions as we can get in the time that we have.
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack. We do have some questions already in the lineup for you. Our first question comes from Stefan Walker from Arkansas, and he's going to be joining us here with recorded video in a moment.
Good afternoon, Secretary Vilsack. My name is Stephen Walker, and I farm in Altamont, Arkansas, where my family has been farming this land since it was free from slavery back in the 1800s. So I work at a university extension program where I help other farmers, and I help them access USDA programs, and I help them find ways to stay on their farm and to stay in their homes. So, we got these questions today that you're going to have a lot of questions about equity, about competition, about climate change, about all of these wonderful things that you have put a priority on in your administration. Now, what it all adds up to is that the USDA programs put a high value on efficiency over other things such as the people, the land, and the communities. So we are grateful for the initiatives and the market resilience and the competition that you announced in your press conferences. But the USDA programs and the farmers I work with, these programs are built to get big or get out. All right, so they're for large scale commodity growers, and that's where they work best. So the programs that target socially disadvantaged producers, like specialty crops, alternative crops, value adding, direct marketing, a lot of the conservation programs, they do a great job at trying to make a change and some of the damage that was already done and turn things around. So what I want to know is the USDA needs to make a fundamental change in its relationship with the farmers. So my question to you is, are you willing to not just add another program or another payment, but to work to restructure the core values or the core objectives of the agency so it will create better values and better opportunities for credit in the crop insurance programs and in the commodity program, and reflect a positive values for the producers in the area to create good competition and resilience and equity?
Senator Vilsack, go ahead.
That's a great question. And I think I would say a couple of things. First and foremost, that's one of the principal reasons why we established the Equity Commission. Obviously, we were directed to do so by Congress, but it was the intention of the administration, the president, to have this Equity Commission established, notwithstanding the action of Congress in the American Rescue Plan, in order for that group of experts to take a look at the current status and structure of USDA, to determine what fundamental changes need to take place in order to remove barriers, in order to make it a department that is more aligned with and more supportive of small and mid-sized producers. I think there is a fair criticism of USDA that for most of our recent past, the focus has been on production and efficiency, which obviously plays to the strengths and the opportunities for larger scale production agriculture. And I think what we forgot in this process is the need for there to be profitability at every level. And this came clearly in line and in my vision with a recent ERS study that came out and established that 89.6% of American farms do not generate a majority of income for the farm family that's operating the farm, which reinforces the question and reinforces the concerns raised in the question. So I think the Equity Commission is going to give us guidance. I think the internal review of what is taking place at USDA will also provide guidance. And then I think there are tools in the American Rescue Plan under Section 1006, where there was additional resources made available to USDA to figure out ways in which we could do a better job of providing access to information that's necessary so that people learn about programs that they could potentially be qualified for, but they may not know about them or they may not know how to qualify for them. That's a real problem. And so as a result, people think that these programs don't necessarily work for them. And I think we have to do a better job at USDA in providing the technical assistance. And then secondly, how do we expand market access? How do we create local and regional food systems that will allow smaller and mid-sized producers not have to deal with a commodity-based market, but a more individualized or personalized market? And I think we are making investments in that system. We have to do a lot more in that system. And I think, frankly, the resources that have been provided under 1006 and under another section of the American Rescue Plan allow us to take a look at that supply chain and how we might be able to strengthen it. And that's one of the reasons why I mentioned the TFAP program, because that's a way, a strategy using procurement dollars from the USDA to provide help and assistance to create a market that hasn't been created before. So a lot of different ways to approach this, but I think you're going to see a consistent effort to try to be a USDA that understands and appreciates the necessity of working for producers who are small scale or who are mid-sized.
Well, I know that's probably music to a lot of the farmers who are watching this, their ears, because as we saw during or in the aftermath or in the midst of COVID, those are the folks who have been feeding us, who have stood up for those who need food, whether they can pay for it or not. And so to find ways to support that food chain, that supply chain is critical in their ability to feel valued by the USDA and by the eaters across the country. Our next question comes from actually your home state of Iowa, from Beth Hoffman, and we're going to hear from her and via video as well.
Hi, my name is Beth Hoffman. I'm a beginning farmer in the beautiful rolling hills of south central Iowa, where we raise grass-finished beef. And I just wrote a book about our experience called Bet the Farm, The Dollars and Cents of Growing Food in America, which will be out in a few weeks. I'm very excited. That talks about the challenges of trying to stay afloat financially as a farmer, which is a really, really difficult thing in the U.S. But my husband and I came into this with some wealth and with access to family-owned land. He's a fifth-generation farmer. And we know that this challenge is exponentially greater for Black, Brown, and Indigenous farmers who have lost land or haven't gotten support in the past from the USDA or banks and other kinds of programs. So we're in full support of the socially disadvantaged farmer debt payments that were passed by Congress in the American Rescue Plan just recently. There have been a lot of delays which we know about. So my question actually is about what we're doing about this in the meantime. I'm concerned about our colleagues of color who were sent letters saying their loans would be forgiven. So I'd like to know the specifics about how they're being protected from foreclosure and other such actions as these cases make their way through court. So what is the agency and Congress doing to support these farmers and keep them on the land? Thank you very much.
Well, it's a good question. And essentially there are, when Congress passed the law, basically directing us to provide debt relief to socially disadvantaged producers, they gave a specific definition of who was meant by socially disadvantaged. They tied it to a 1990 act of Congress, which basically talked about people who have been discriminated against by virtue of race or by virtue of ethnicity. That included African American, Hispanic, Native American farmers. It did not include white farmers. Immediately upon the signing of that bill, we began the effort to try to implement as quickly as possible. Part of what we did was to send out letters and to begin a process of communicating to folks about debt relief. That was the question, the letters that were alluded to in the question. As we began the process, we got to a point where we were asking farmers to essentially verify the level of debt that we had on our books to make sure that as we forgave that debt, that it was the right amount. And as we provided the 20% additional payment to cover any tax liability, or at least a portion of the tax liability, that we got the right amount. We wanted people to verify. That process has continued because when and if injunctions are lifted, we want to be in a position to be able to proceed as expeditiously as possible to relieve the debt. Now, there are 13 cases, and all 13 cases have had injunctive relief directing us to stop any payment. They haven't directed us to stop sending letters out and getting information and being able to verify the level of debt. Senator Stabenow made reference to the fact that there is an effort in Congress to try to figure out a way in which we could potentially moot the cases that are currently pending so that we could get as much debt relief to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. So if Congress is able to pass that law, or if injunctions are lifted, we will be in a position to respond as quickly as possible to make good on whatever Congress directs us to do, or whatever we can do under the American Rescue Plan. So we haven't stopped doing what we can to get in a position to be able to respond as quickly as possible. I would also say that we are also proceeding forward on the companion section to the debt relief, which is the section 1006 that I referred to earlier. We're continuing to look at ways in which we can get resources to provide technical assistance, get resources out to analyze how we might be able to expand market access and how we might be able to take a look at the issue of land access. One of the things we recently did on the land access area was to get the heirs property rule that had been USDA was directed to get heirs property rule decided in the 2018 Farm Bill. The previous administration took no action on the implementation of that rule. This has to do with fractional ownership of land. Many African-American families, many Hispanic families basically have ownership of land, but because there were no wills or because of intestate laws or whatever it might be, there's not a clear title. And so we passed this heirs property law, creating a relending program that will allow folks to consolidate title so they have clear title, so that it opens up a whole series of programs at USDA that are dependent on being able to have title. So that might be able to provide some degree of help and assistance in expanding land access and allowing folks to begin to accumulate some sense of connection to the land and wealth from the land. So there's a lot going on in this space, and we'll continue to work hard to provide as much equity as we can, as quickly as we can, as soon as either the courts or Congress enables us to do so.
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack. We have a lot more questions for you than we have your time for, but we are also grateful for so many USDA staff who are going to be joining us for this next session. We'll do our best to funnel some of those questions in their direction, but I'm sure we'll be talking with you after this town hall is over. Thank you so much for joining us and for answering the questions that were posed.
Well, I appreciate, again, I'm very honored to be here today, and we look forward to continued partnership and working with the folks at Farm Aid. I think you'll see us continue to focus on the folks that you care about and that we care about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to pass the baton back to my friend Scott Marlowe, who is going to take us into the next session. Thank you so much for joining us over this last hour.
Thank you very much, Niaz. And thank you to all of our panelists, to Senator Smith, Senator Stabenow, and Secretary Vilsack. For our next panel, I'd like to introduce Kiana Mickey. Kiana Mickey has worked for over 11 years within the regional food and farm system to increase small farm viability, healthy food access, and economic opportunities for farmers and historically marginalized communities. Kiana is also active in local and international policy work related to food sovereignty, land tenure, and health. She's the former executive director of Just Food, and is currently consulting on multiple policy, racial equity, and food enterprise projects, both locally and nationally. Kiana?
Hi, thanks for the introduction, the warm introduction. It's been so good to be here and hear everybody and all these questions. I know there's a lot more questions. I'm hoping we get to a bunch in this session as well. So thank you again, Scott. I'm happy to be here. Happy to start this panel with our USDA leadership. There's so many folks here. So I thought what I can do is maybe start with reading some brief, to help us with introductions, do a little brief bio read to start, and then we're going to kick into our farmer questions. We'll have some live, we might have some video, and there might be some that I might have to read. We have about an hour and a half, but I know we're going to get to so many questions, and it's going to take us. There's so many rich conversations to be had, so there might be the chance that we don't get to all questions. So I want to acknowledge that up front. I really appreciate all the farmers that have joined us, that will stay on with us. I hope we get to as many questions as possible. And we're going to make sure before we wrap up to the closing remarks that we make sure that the panelists or the farmers know how to reach all our panelists. But without further ado, I would like to start introducing some of our panelists. The first person I'd like to lift up is Zach Duchanel. He currently serves as the administrator for the USDA's Farm Service Agency. In this role, he provides leadership and oversight across FSA's loan conservation, commodity, disaster, and farm marketing programs. He previously served as the executive director of the Intertribal Agriculture Council, the largest, longest standing Native American agriculture organization in the United States. He is one of many partners on his family's ranch on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation in north central South Dakota. I'm going to read through all the bios, and then we'll be able to jump in with everybody. Next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dwayne Goldman. He serves as a key advisor to Secretary Vilsack on a broad range of matters related to racial equity and justice across the USDA. As the Secretary's Senior Advisor for Racial Equity, he provides leadership on implementation of congressional initiatives and cross-departmental racial equity priorities and initiatives. He works closely with the Secretary and the USDA personnel to address cumulative impacts of prior discrimination and transform the USDA into a racially equitable department. That's exciting. Next, we're going to also have Gloria Montano Green. She currently serves as the Deputy Undersecretary for the USDA's Farm Production and Conservation Mission area. In this role, she provides leadership across the USDA agencies that deliver farm programs and services to farmers, ranchers, and agriculture producers. These include programs administered by FSA, the Farm Service Agency, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Risk Management Agency. She is a former executive of the Farm Service Agency in Arizona. Next, we have Janie Sims Hip. Hi. She currently serves as the USDA's General Counsel and is responsible for providing legal advice and oversight across USDA programs and operations. She is the first Native American woman to serve in that post in the USDA's history. She oversees, I think, about 200 lawyers, which I can't even imagine doing myself. She's held previous positions within the USDA and helped create the Office of Tribal Relations. She also founded the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative and served as the CEO of the Native American Agriculture Fund. She is a member of the Chickasaw Nation. Thanks for being here. I have two more folks, Kate Nassens, and please let me know if I mispronounced your last name wrong, and if I did, I apologize. She is the senior professional staff on the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee under the leadership of Chairman Debbie Stabenow, who we heard from previously. She has been in the office for 8 years and leads the committee's work on agriculture research, new and beginning farmers, BIPOC farmers, organics, local food systems, and urban agriculture. Prior to joining the committee, she's worked for the Secretary of Agriculture, focusing on meat and poultry food safety, specialty crops, healthy food financing, organics, rural and public and private financial partnerships. And last but not least, we have Adam Tarr, who's also a senior professional staffer on the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, and leads the committee's work on Farm Bill conservation title issues, including programs like the Conservation Stewardship Program, Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And prior to joining the committee, he was a legislative assistant for Senator Casey of Pennsylvania, where he led the senator's work on the 2018 Farm Bill reauthorization. Wow, such a great panel. I think we're gonna have also great farmers to hear from. So there's just a wealth of knowledge here, a wealth of engagement or engagement that I'm hoping we can really jump into. I'm going to start with, I think we have our first question is going to be a video from Ray Jeffers of North Carolina.
Hi, my name is Ray Jeffers, small farmer in Person County, North Carolina, and also policy manager for RAFI USA. My question involves around trust. After growing up and learning about the different programs FSA and USDA had to offer, I often wondered why my family never took advantage of them. So I went back and asked my grandfather and my uncle, who were the farmers at the time, and I learned of all the horror stories of so many minority farmers who went in their local FSA office and were denied loans when they needed help the most. Also learned of the mistrust they had with the local committee members, because often those that were denied either went into foreclosure or had to sell their farm, and it was those same committee members who either purchased their farm below market value or in foreclosure, and oftentimes they were the larger producer or larger farmers in the county. How do we go about rebuilding trust amongst our minority farmers with our local offices?
Yes, that's an excellent question. I think, what we've been hearing and we're going to continue to hear is this need to continue to build trust. And how do we move forward? How do we acknowledge what's happened in the past? And how do we dismantle that to move forward? So I think this is a question that's so important. I'd love to open it up to the full panel, but perhaps maybe we can start with Jeannie.
How did I know you were going to ask me first? First of all, I've got to say this. It's really good to be with Farm Aid today. I actually looked on your timeline this morning, and I think I was at concert number 4, which ages me considerably. But I see a lot of old friends that are participating today, and John Zippert and Stephen Carpenter and Shirley Sherrod and Carolyn herself and Scott. I mean, how many places have Scott and I been together, and my dear friend Savvy Horn and my dear friend Sarah Vogel. I mention their names because it is really important that we have people in USDA who can connect with folks on the ground who've lived experiences like the farmer who just spoke, and that understand exactly what he talked about. You cannot build trust between people if you don't tell the truth, and if you don't acknowledge the past, and if you don't work together to try to turn things around and create a better future. And trust is very easy to break, and it's really hard to rebuild. And I'll tell you straight up that every day I show up for work in my new role, I'm all about building trust. That's what I'm talking to all of the lawyers in the Office of General Counsel about. And I know Dwayne is doing the same. I know Zach is doing the same. We all are at a critical moment, and Gloria as well, but we've all got to pull together, and we've got to rebuild those relationships, and we've got to be honest and truthful with each other at all times. And we've got to all get on the same page, because if we don't, we're in trouble. And I'm just going to speak the truth always to you all, but Farm Aid is very much a part of my life. It always has been. And in the Office of General Counsel, I've told all of our lawyers who I'm just now, kind of in the chair and establishing relationships with all of them, that we are going to be about rebuilding trust. We're going to be about looking at the world through the eyes of the people who go to Farm Aid, who literally are on the ground farming and ranching. And if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job. So trust is central to everything I'm trying to do in my new role.
Thank you, Janie. I appreciate that. Zach, I'm wondering what your thoughts or comments might be for this question.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody at Farm Aid for having us, and thanks to a wonderful panel for participating. I thank you to the farmers for continuing to do what you do. I think an important aspect of trust is believing that whoever you're dealing with understands where you're coming from. And I think that's something that the folks that are here on behalf of Secretary Vilsack representing the department bring. I've lived those same experiences, Ray. I know where you're coming from, and we know the solutions. My first experience with Farm Aid was training as a farm advocate there 20 years ago with the folks from FLAG, Stephen Carpenter, Len Kling, Lynn Hayes, all of our old friends that have been advocating for producers since the farm crisis of the 80s. At every one of those meetings, there was one Indian kid from the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation saying, who's going to hold these guys accountable when they don't do what they're supposed to do? Now he's your administrator. And he wants to know when you run into those type of things, because you have to know that you've got a voice from the top down now to help move these things. There may be things that we can't overcome, but we can for darn sure try to educate people and root out that type of behavior from above and below. So we're going to continue to need your help in the field to identify those circumstances where we're not earning your trust at the local level. We definitely want to hear about it. I give my email out freely and I answer all of my own emails. It's zach.duchesneau@usda.gov. Ray, email me. Any of you that have issues, email me and we'll get to the bottom of it, and we're going to build a better relationship.
Thank you. That's so encouraging to hear. I want to pass the mic to Dwayne or Dr. Goldman. What I'd like to add to this question, or hopefully that you can add to your responses, what can you share in maybe the work that you're doing to kind of answer the question like Farmer Ray offered, but what about folks in particular, farmers of color that want to speak out, but maybe are hesitant to reach out, not just because of historical trauma around the work, but even just currently, how can you, or what can you do in your work to encourage folks that reaching out directly will not come with grave consequences or concerns about reaching out directly? How can we continue to amplify or encourage folks to reach out and speak out boldly and with intention?
Thank you, Kiana. And I want to thank Mr. Jeffers for bringing the trust issue at the front and forefront of our discussion. We are, we have to admit, and I can't reiterate what my colleagues Janie and Zach just said. We understand that we operate from a position of distrust. We have a trust deficit at USDA, and guess what, Mr. Jeffers? That's not an accusation. That trust deficit is actually justified. I come to you as the third generation farmer in Arkansas, and I had in my career path, I spent 30 years in the chemical and seed industry and been farming over almost 25 years. But being the senior advisor for racial equity was not in my career plans. But when you are on the outside advocating and you are presented with an opportunity to come in, kind of like Zach, and say the buck stops here and we're going to get serious around this, I think that's why I'm in this position. And a key to that is understanding that people fundamentally don't trust us. And here are some of the things that we have to look at. We have to seriously ask the question, why is it that the very customers that we are bound to serve don't trust us? And it's a fact of the matter that we don't know what we don't know. So when your father and your grandfather goes in to USDA to get a loan, to get a conservation program, to get any type of assistance it is, and they come out, and the situation you described, Mr. Jeffers, where they come out and actually end up not getting what they wanted, but jeopardizing the few things they did have by going in because of a county committee system that was rigged against a farmer of color being able to retain or build on their assets. We understand that. And so since I started on March 1, we've done a cross-departmental assessment of where are we from a data position, where are we in terms of being equitable? And we've discovered some things that we knew. We also discovered some things that probably wasn't as apparent. But here's the exciting part. We're now in the stage where we're starting to look at some of the underlying reasons of the disparities that we saw. And we're starting to engage with now, and I gotta admit, I'm not a Farm Aid alum. I have been admiring your work from the sidelines for a long time, but I'm not a Farm Aid alum. I'm so glad to be among you. But it's through engagements like this where we take notes and go back and put plans in action that we will improve. And to Zach's point earlier, the buck stops here. And so our goal now, when you look at a presidential administration that says we are implementing an executive order that you will achieve racial equity and justice across all of your departmental areas And you leave a little latitude up to our boss, in this case, Secretary Vilsack, to figure out how to get that done. And he puts this position in place, but he also puts racial equity at a very prominent position throughout the department. It's not just the words that do it, it's giving people the responsibilities and the resources to actually accomplish that. Thank God for the American Rescue Plan and for working with us as we work through both the intent and the regroup of how we continue to do that. But I think, Mr. Jeffers, you will see where things will start to trickle out. Things will start to trickle out where we will ask for the opportunity to earn your trust again. You'll see a change in the way certain loan programs are implemented or some of the options that may be available to you, and maybe having a little better understanding of what can be done to actually achieve those benefits that you apply for, because that's the kind of work that we've got to engage in. Okay?
Thank you. Yes, I'm inspired, and I'm looking at even just this panel here, and I'm seeing such a diversity in leadership that even in my years of doing food and farm systems work and policy, I haven't seen. So I'm continue to be encouraged by the words and what we're sharing, and looking forward to hearing from the rest of our panelists. I'm going to pass the mic to Gloria. I'm curious too what your thoughts on to answering a question around building trust and accountability, and maybe if there's additional light that you can share there as well. Like if we're supposed to start to see some of these changes happening, what is this accountability going to look like internally? And I mean, how is it building internally, and what will we see on the ground externally?
No, so there's a, like you shared earlier, to be able to see the panel that's presented, I think to make change and equity change and to do trust, it needs to happen in both directions at the same time, at the top, right? And bottom up, top down. There's a saying in Spanish that says, dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres. Tell me who you surround yourself with, and I'll tell you what kind of a person you are. And I think to be able to think at the way that this administration is starting out the gates and putting some of the thought, the experiences, and the knowledge to be able to change the status quo, to be able to seek opportunities for change, is a different way of how business is done. But I will say that with trust and equity, if you wanted to have a good relationship and a good trust relationship and good change, all of those take time, because you're undoing the spaghetti bowl of mess of discrimination that has been around for decades. It's not just something that's like the last 3 to 5 years. And so I think that's one of the things is patience is probably not something that we can be asking for, but it needs to be, how do we both meet each other on the way? And so we have to make it in the programs that we implement, evaluate how are we doing these programs, like how are we making them easier to access. When we're getting back reflections of what we're doing, is really start making the question of who isn't present in the items that we're doing. So with the pandemic assistant, we very clearly saw who was not present in all the COVID relief that happened prior to us joining the administration. We stopped that. We reopened it, but we reopened it with education outreach to go and talk to community members to be able to say, you're leaving money on the table and we know that you are behind. And so it's kind of asking those questions of why aren't we there? And I think the other opportunities we have, right, with employment, you have state executive directors that will be coming into the state that will be helping lead the state level accountability, not just the headquarter work. So I would just say that my work in the past of doing community work and community trust is just also just making sure to say we actually belong here, and we're supposed to be participating, and that you have a whole set of leadership that is putting that not just in an expectation, but in things that we're moving forward, is just a way of how we're approaching business differently.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate hearing that. And, you know, I think we're going to continue to touch on trust and accountability throughout some of our next set of questions. Katie and Adam, I'm actually going to probably kick this question about trust in some of your work and some of the questions that come a little bit further down. But I wanted to lift up another question that's coming live. So I want to make sure we get here and spotlight Will de la Cámara from
Camera.
Connecticut.
From Northford, Connecticut. I'm William Della Camera of Ciccarelli's Harrison Hill Farm in Northford, Connecticut. And over the years, we've worked with some food justice programs with the city of Bridgeport, mainly part of Gus Schumacher, an old secretary was part of that, an old undersecretary. We were close with him working with that, and some Wholesome Waves on Double and Snap and Wick. That was, about 10 or 15 years ago. So fast forward to last year and during the COVID relief, I was part of the Farmers to Families Food Box program, which was designed for COVID relief for farmers and people in need. During that time, I saw firsthand need for fresh food products for families. I realized that it's not the food justice problem extended far beyond just COVID. It's a real issue that needs to be addressed. So designing a program that brings healthy, fresh farm products to families in need, and not just another shelf-stable processed food product, can change a person's lifestyle and eating habits. Any program that could be designed needs to be designed to compensate the farmers at a fair price point based on the region they are located in, and going directly to the farmer instead of a wholesale aggregation company, which they have in the past. This would make it fairer and more equitable for the farmer and keep it from being a race to the lowest bid as it was over the past year, in the lowest bid from any packaging company. So if the USDA didn't want to design a program, such a program, is there a way that there could be federal funds administered through state departments of ag, allowing them to oversee the program? And that would become more region specific if the Department of Ag of that state either had input or was the administrator of the program. And if there was a design of this program, I think we all need to work together in this. We need to make this work to keep family farms more sustainable. These small farmers could really, gain having programs like this. And as you all know, small farmers like myself and everybody else that's come before me, we are the backbone of the country's food system. We can't be looked over anymore. If we need to become more resilient and make sure that no one's left hungry. And I think we also need to look at it as as an economic development part too, because if I do good, then the box guy I buy boxes from does good. The label guy I buy labels from does good. All my ag related companies I do business with, we all become stronger if we could keep this money, more regionalized and more to us small farmers. So my question is about, making another food box system like we saw, but, a better, more resilient one.
Yep. Thank you so much, Will, for that important question. Yes, we didn't hear from Adam and Katie yet. I wanted to see if you wanted to jump in and answer this really important question. Like, how are we going to continue to see our agencies support, viable programs, not just an immediate, but what are some of the long-term support that farmers like Will can see or expect?
Absolutely. And Will, thank you so much for sharing and asking a really, really important question. And Kiana, I want to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you to Farm Aid for hosting this important conversation. We're really excited to be here and to also have a chance to talk about some of the new policy developments. And the food box program has been something that we have seen evolve over time. This was the first opportunity for a lot of smaller and local food producers to participate in some of our feeding programs, which was really, really exciting. And Chairwoman Stabenow is interested in continuing to expand on some of the procurement opportunities I think you hit the nail on the head when you said looking at regional prices, making sure that, it's not a race to the bottom in terms of how we're putting food into some of our food system and some of the commodity programs. And so this is absolutely, I think, something that we will continue to see on a legislative front. In fact, in the House, there was a new bill that was just introduced this week by Representative Rosa DeLauro, focused on creating a food box program. And I think we'll continue to see this conversation in the next farm bill. I think the last couple of farm bills did a great job of trying to expand access to healthy food, whether it was through nutrition incentives, as you mentioned, your work with Wholesome Wave, to looking at more local and regional opportunities. And I think procurement is kind of the next frontier. And so we look forward to working with the department on doing that, but we also look forward to making sure that there is a food box program in the future that really supports the local needs and ensures that we're getting fresh products in communities where they may not have an opportunity to get access to some of those fresh products. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Katie. Yes. Adam, I think some of the farmers that I've heard and seen is these programs were tough for them to apply to before. Are there ways that we can expect that some of these programs will continue to support small scale farmers, beginning farmers, and that can provide like fair pricing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this ties into the sort of the first question on trust. USDA rolled out a really impressive initiative over the last month out of NRCS, where they announced sort of cooperative agreements where the agency would partner, right, with local groups to target underserved or farmers that are maybe traditionally have a hard time accessing those programs. So recognizing that, I think it's going to take time to rebuild trust. We need to try to find workarounds in the meantime, and that might be USDA partnering with trusted organizations to reach producers and bring them into these programs.
Yep, great. Thank you so much. And I think this helps us lead into our next question from Israel Montañez Adorno from Puerto Rico. And touching on programs for underserved or historically marginalized communities.
Good afternoon. My name is Israel Montañez, and I'm a farmer from Puerto Rico. My question is based on two topics. Number one, information access. Information access is a struggle. I'll give you an example. On September 2nd, I received orientation for a federal aid, which the deadline was on the 15th of the same month. So I had pretty much 13 days to apply for that aid. So information is a struggle. My second topic is the centralization of all USDA agencies who provide services to farmers. Having to travel from one office to another within the agency, it's time consuming, it's frustrating, and it's not cost effective. So what I'm asking you is, what would you do to make sure the information is getting to small farmers in a timely manner? And what steps, if any, is the agency taking in centralizing all USDA agencies that provide services to farmers across the nation and its territories? Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. Great question. I'm actually going to pass the mic to Zach. I'm curious to anything you can contribute to this really rich question.
Yeah, I think so. And thanks, Israel, for the question.
Thank you, Israel. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for the question. Thanks for joining us. Puerto Rico has its own unique circumstances to overcome with the hurricane troubles that they've had in the last few years and being so isolated. So we understand that centralizing offices may benefit some, but it may be at the expense of others. So what we're working on is trying to take the lessons we learned from delivering our programs and services in the pandemic forward so that we can continue to deliver those services regardless of where our staff and where our customers are. Another thing that's really important is that we're going to emphasize and lean on our cooperators out there in the field, like Farm Aid, like the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers, to help deliver those services where we can't reach. They might frankly have a better connection with some of the producers in your communities. We're going to use cooperative agreements to get our message out there further to share it with those small producers. There are initiatives across the department, however, to increase broadband access, which are really critical in order to ensure that producers have access to that information, but it's got to be affordable access. I have the good fortune of being from an Indian reservation that had a very progressive approach to technology. So we've got fiber to every doorstep. If our reservation in the middle of South Dakota can do that, other locations can. And we've got friends in the Rural Development Administration that are willing to help you try to do that. Israel, thank you for the question. I hope I helped a little bit with that. Information access is key. We're trying to get it out there in a more timely manner so that it's of more use to you.
Kiana, this is Janie. Can I jump in here, please?
Yes.
Okay. A couple of things I wanted to mention too. And I know that Dwayne and Gloria and Zach and I, when we were in our internal, oh my God.
Are you having, we might be having some connectivity issues, Janie.
Yeah, can you hear me still?
We can hear you. You might, your screen is frozen, but we can hear you. Do you want to just share verbally?
Yeah, please let me do that. This is freaking me out, but I'll get over it. I think one of the things I wanted to mention before we got too far down the line was, you know, the prior question was about was about the food box situation. And, you know, one of the things that I have found in my work over the years is that sometimes it can be just a beast to try to interact with the department. And we have to constantly check ourselves, I think, on how are we going to move forward now into the future in such a way that we break down the disconnects on like, for instance, trying to get yourself into the food box program was really difficult because you're asking small farmers to actually come up to speed immediately with interacting with a beast of a department, which the USDA is huge. And I think we have to do a better job. And I know we will, to actually have mechanisms where it is made more simpler and is made more fluid and it's out there with you in such a way that you can truly access. And I think those are difficult things to try to plan, but we're all committed to planning them in such a way that we can address, you know, both of the two previous speakers' questions, which are at their essence, it is, how do I interact with you? You're so big and your timetables don't meet my timetables. I think if we constantly look at things through the eyes of farmers and ranchers, then we can get there. And I just wanted to say that before we moved on.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you lifting that up. It's so true. I mean, these are the things that we hear from farmers, you know, farmers of color, farmers of small to mid scale, is oftentimes the difficulty of connecting either directly or building those or leveraging the relationships with grassroots organizations that maybe have direct or community, you know, engagement with the USDA. Before we move to the next question, because I do think this is really important, I'm really glad you shared that, Janie, is if I wanted to check in, if Dwayne, if you had anything to comment on, you know, moving forward, like what can farmers of color in particular, or other historically marginalized farmers continue to see, or are there organizations that you're working with or plan to work with that would really help bridge these gaps?
Well, yeah, I'll just comment that it's going to sound simple when I say we don't know what we don't know. So if you're on the outside trying to navigate, obtain that first loan grant USDA service and you've never done it, and you have the distrust that we talked about earlier, you know, we as a department, I think, have to put ourselves in the mindset of trying to help those who don't know what they don't know. And I don't mean it in any kind of belittling way, but a lot of times our approach, our forms, our, you know, already mentioned the deadlines. We need to be thinking about those things as those programs are developed, so that we can go back and reach those customers who historically have had a difficult time achieving what they desire. But there's another piece to it, and it's a very important piece, and that is internally, we need to be more sensitive, I think, to some of the nuances that would translate to a successful application. And part of that work that I talked about before, when we were looking at the department from an internal standpoint as well as from an external standpoint, some of those things were mentioned. Now, we still got to figure out exactly how to get it done, but emphasizing all the things that need to be done in order to make, to convert a customer from a frustrated person who thinks the whole process is just too cumbersome to someone who is actually afforded the benefits that they apply for. I think it's a challenge that we look to take on. And we're already seeing some pretty positive outcomes when we look at things just a little bit differently.
Great, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that accountability on making the process easier. I think that's going to resonate quite well with a lot of farmers that have had these barriers or experienced these barriers. I want to pivot to a question around mitigating climate change and some of the impacts that farmers have been feeling. I'm hoping that we feel like policy is going to start catching up and supporting farmers that are really working towards addressing climate change or mitigating climate change, no matter their region. I want to pitch oh, yes, we have a video from Michael Kovac from Pennsylvania that I'd love to lift up now.
My name is Michael Kovac. I'm a regenerative multiple species family farmer here in Northwest Pennsylvania, and I'm also the Vice President and Policy Director for the Pennsylvania Farmers Union. We've been very encouraged by the President's initiative to address climate change and his urgency around doing so, and as well as his acknowledgement of agriculture's significant role to play in that. My question is, how, after decades of incentivizing tillage and pesticides and synthetic fertilizers and best management practices that are extractive and destructive of soil, largely, do we get to a place where we are incentivizing practices that grow soil, that sequester carbon, that make more nutritious food, that reduce input costs for family farmers, all those things? Thanks very much.
Great question. I'm going to pass the mic to Adam. Do you have any thoughts that you want to add in terms of thinking about some of the work that you've been doing? What does the USDA have authority to, and what changes or what improvements are we can continue to see around climate investment?
Sure, thanks. And I don't know if Michael's watching right now, but I know Michael well. Great question. Good to see the video, Michael. So some folks may have caught Chairwoman Stabenow on the earlier panel. This is a significant priority for her, and she's prioritized securing significant funding for what she likes to call climate smart agriculture in the reconciliation package that is currently under consideration in Congress. Specifically, we've got agreement with the House side on a $28 billion investment in climate smart ag that would be divided up among the conservation programs that are administered at USDA. But much of that is geared towards exactly what Michael's talking about, recognizing that these conservation practices, they can be burdensome to implement. It takes time, it takes money. And so if we want to see producers implement these practices, we need to give them the resources to do it. And sort of getting back to the earlier question on trust, I mean, we need to find ways to give them the necessary technical assistance through partnerships with outside organizations to sort of help them along. And so we are hopeful that as we go through this process here on our side, that as much of this pot of money will survive so that our friends at USDA can go ahead and implement it and sort of get these resources into the hands of producers.
Yeah, getting the money to the producers, absolutely. Is there anybody else on the panel, perhaps Zach or Gloria, maybe even Katie, that might want to add some additional insight and what maybe your agency is doing as well around climate investment and change?
Yeah, I would real quick, and then I'll pass it off to somebody else because this is an important question. And Michael, I really appreciate that you let off multi-species and regenerative. One of the aspects that we're really keen to is that in order to enlist more producers in this, we have to free them from the economic shackles that keep them in this commodity ag system. There isn't a cow-calf guy in the country that wants to put a 5-month-old ball and calf on a truck to go 3 states away to a feedlot. The mechanisms for financial support to convert to that grass-fed operation really don't exist, nor does the infrastructure to get that animal to that type of a market. But it's what our producers would rather do and what our consumers want. But so much of the apparatus in between us keeps us from really getting in touch. So I understand where you're coming from, and it's got to come from financial freedom to give that producer the choice to get there, the choice to make that climate smart ag choice. And that's really what we're going to try to do with FSA and our farm loan programs and our other programs as we roll them out.
Yeah, and Kiana, I'm going to jump in here again, and I can't help myself. All my friends at Farm Aid know this about me. We got to be flexible, and we got to make sure that small to mid-sized farms, family-owned farms, and farmers of color, everybody's got to be at the table on climate smart agriculture, period. And to Zach's point, the financial piece is really important. We got to calibrate the programs properly, but we've got to pay attention also to financial infrastructures that sit up underneath all of our producers so that they can actually have the patience and flexibility to be involved in these things. So it all has to be interwoven. And I can tell you straight up that I've instructed all of the attorneys in the Office of General Counsel to look at things in a new way, in that sort of way that brings everybody to the table and that anticipates problems and kinks in the system so that we can, at least as far as we're concerned, get out in front of some of these legal issues that are embedded in all of this and be flexible and proactive. We've got to keep people at the table and involved.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Thank you for jumping into. I'm a girl from the Bronx, so jumping in and cutting off and taking mics back or something I'm really comfortable with. And time is like going so fast, so I might actually start doing a little bit more of that myself. But I do appreciate you chiming in. And we have a related question, actually directly from the chat, from Adam Warson from Organic Valley. And wanted to just lift up if some of our speakers could talk about or speak to how we see U.S. farm policy better supporting farmers that want renewable energy generation on the farm and need or want that support to decarbonize the economy. So how do we increase these economic powers for our farmers that want to lean into some of the energy resilient work? And it seems like we have this big opportunity to build more resilient rural communities. So I wanted to offer this follow-up question and see what folks are thinking about. How is the USDA or your agency in particular going to help support farmers that really want to lean into some of these changes that we desperately need right now? Yes, Dwayne?
I'll start out. When you look at climate smart agriculture, if you compare that to a lot of the other things at USDA, I think you might agree with me that it's a kind of a new initiative. It's certainly a step in the right direction, but it's a new initiative. And when I came into this role looking at racial equity, the department from the secretary down realized that, look, we're going to mess this up if we fix the prior inequities and don't keep our eye on the new initiatives that are coming out, which brought climate smart agriculture, environmental justice right in the thick of things. And so we are in full contact talking about equity. And it's not just about races. I mean, it's total equity, making sure that these things reach people at regardless of what they're growing, what their size is, whether they're organic or traditional, because our mandate is not to incentivize one area over another as much as it is to make sure that everyone has a fair and equitable chance at, in this case, we're talking about climate smart agriculture, but making sure that the rewards reach those that are small or organic and want to participate more fully. If you look at the fact that we pulled in the final CFAP payment to make it a little more equitable, I think that was a strong signal that this administration is serious about trying to reach people where they are. And it is the right thing to do, but there's also a population world food demand that's strongly tied to us getting this one right. Because all of a sudden it's not about making the white farmer versus a black farmer, or the big farmer versus a small one, or the organic versus a more traditional, or animal versus plant. It's not about making one of those more successful, more profitable over the other. It's more about making sure that each of those has an opportunity to operate at peak efficiency to feed a growing world population. And so when you look at it from that and you start thinking about our responsibility to really mitigate climate change and protect the environment, make ag more sustainable, I mean, it only makes sense that you would, take a deep dive and look at how you do that across all sectors.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Gloria.
Yeah, so if I could, I think, this is, I think, one is how do we make sure there's incentives to do all this work that make sure it's voluntary. I think there's been a huge fear and concern. There's several initiatives the secretary laid out as climate smart agenda. I've been doing various work over my life, and agriculture is usually like an afterthought within the climate change mitigation work. And what came out of the federal family from the Biden-Harris administration really make sure that producers are centered in there, and I think that has a lot to do with the secretary. And I know it does. That the solution has to happen, and it has to be centered on what we needs are. And so those concepts of what are the incentives, how are we meeting for those that are already doing it, how are we supporting them to continue doing it within the agencies, within the FPAC, under the administrator's leadership, right, has been working on how do you incentivize some of the programs that we have to make them more worthwhile to participate in. NRCS, for the equity aspect, and equity, I guess, climate justice, if you're thinking about it in that space, we have some work to do. We've been looking at our numbers of enrollment of EQIP, looking at our enrollment of the Regional Conservation Program and Partnership, and just other of the conservation stewardship, the conservation innovation grants. And there hasn't been that enrollment in the equity space as much, even though there's been that historically underrepresented incentives. And so we need to think about what is it? And it goes back to some of the things we've been hearing about. Some of it's the paperwork is too difficult, the timeline is too extreme or too short. And so we've been revisiting on how are we thinking about streamlining it, making that more accessible if we want to have better adoption and be able to think about it. And I'm looking at Katie, who very much knows about the urban agriculture work, which we haven't talked about here, but I think there's a need to be able to think about that in the beginning farmer and the urban ag space, because urban ag can't be separated from climate change and climate justice. I'm an Arizona girl, and for me, and the work that I was previously doing on some climate justice and making sure the community was part of the solution since we're most impacted by it. The urban agriculture, the urban gardens was one of the best things to help us with heat islands and food deserts simultaneously. So NRCS is leading the urban agriculture work across the department in collaboration with FSA. And so that's like one of the solutions to think about, not solely, while they're also doing the soil health, the carbon sequestration, better evaluation and measurement of it. It's also looking at how are we better embedding ourselves in our community. It was part of the 2018 Farm Bill. It was, I would say, Katie will probably talk better about this than I do, but I would say it was probably dormant in the last administration. We've been working to revive it, but that takes some time to move that ship from where it was. And then I think the other one in the component within the FBAC areas, you have risk management agency, the crop insurance responsibility, which has gotten a little bit of a bad name in the past of not being part of addressing climate smart. And they have also been looking at leaning in and working on how they can be better supportive. This summer, we released a pandemic cover crop to be able to provide some of the premium offset of that, and looking to see how that is expansive. So there are solutions within each agency, and I think we just need to be able to go through. And we also need to do a better job for those that are naysayers. And I have been saying for us to be able to do climate change mitigation within agriculture, that this is, farmers know more than anyone that we are in disaster mode due to climate change. We are losing biodiversity, and therefore we need to be part and centered in the solution, and we need to embrace it. And everything that we've always done has always been voluntary and incentivized. And I think we just need to be able to work collaboratively to push back that narrative that it's not.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to pitch it to you, Katie. I'm actually going to frame a question for a two-parter, but I want to just highlight too what I appreciate you, Gloria, for everything you shared, but in particular, highlighting that climate change and equity should also include our urban spaces, and we haven't really lifted that up. Also, the land tenure is so different. And land stewardship looks really differently in urban spaces versus rural spaces. And that equity, if this is, if equity is a North Star for so many of us, and we have this vision, how are we going to continue to move this into action? And something that I always kind of hear from the farmers I work with, and some of my North Star to work is the intersection of equity, racial, economic, and environmental. And if we keep siloing it, this is where we start to see or continue to perpetuate inequities. But when we really start to see this lens of the intersection of equity, then we really start to dismantle some of that narrative around, if you support folks that have historically been marginalized, then you're building preference. And it sounds like there's a collective desire to not just lift up the multifacetedness of equity, but the more progress that is happening within, that we're seeing more resistance around addressing inequity in different ways. So I'm going to pitch it to you, Katie, in terms of thinking about equitable access. If you want to lift up, I know you've done a lot of work on local food systems, also urban ag, even access to credit. I think these are some of the things that when we talk about equity, economic and environmental, would really love to hear your thoughts. And I think we have some questions that will maybe dig into that. But maybe if you have something to share now, and then I'll bring questions in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kiana, for that great question. And I think you're absolutely right. It is kind of the central focus that ties everything together, because if you're talking about equity, you're talking about access to credit, you're talking about access to land, you're talking about a market opportunity. And I think that local and regional food systems are certainly an area and a way to do that. I think that we are seeing, especially with a lot of our new and beginning farmers, maybe they're getting started in urban areas. And so, I think all of these things kind of intersect in a lot of ways and are really important to trying to build out that next generation. And what does that look like? And how do we continue to support all of this? It is, an exciting opportunity, because we really are at a point in time where all of these things are coming together. And in order for us to, fight the climate crisis, in order for us to feed our communities, how are we thinking about all of the ways that those things intersect? And so I'm happy to talk more, as specific questions come out, but I will say, I don't think that we can think about one without thinking about how all of these pieces are connected.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes. Doug, I see that you're ready and live and would love to hear your question.
So good afternoon, and thank you for your time today. My name is Doug Hopperman. My wife and I own a small regenerative ag farm in Nixon, Texas. We are also a mentor training farm for a Texas agribility program called Battleground or Breaking Ground, focused on training military veterans in entering into agriculture. On September 8th, 2021, in a White House press briefing, Secretary Vilsack stated that the supply and distribution channel providing food for our country is broken, and that the consolidation in meat and dairy industries, coupled with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic to our distribution system, have resulted in lower revenue for farmers and higher prices on the grocery shelves. I'm grateful that on July the 9th, 2021, the USDA released a $500 million program for expanded meat and poultry processing to address the competition and help level the playing field for family farms and small producers. We know that the large companies will utilize their leverage and resources to guide the use of these funds to their benefit and prevent the erosion of their control of both markets and farmers. How will the USDA ensure that the $500 million and any additional funds for local and regional processors remain outside of the envelope of consolidation and help decentralize protein processing? And how do I and farmers like me get a seat at the table to help define the utilization of these funds? Thank you.
Oh, great question. Yeah, how do farmers like Doug get to engage more? Janie, would you like to share first?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Doug. If you knew how many conversations internally have been on just this week about this issue, I feel like this was my topic for the week. But I can assure you that the conversations that are going on internally within the department are very much speaking straight into what you lifted up. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that today, Katie and Adam, I mean, you sat there and saw what I saw. We have significant concerns about competition in the entire marketplace, and it is on both sides of the aisle, and it is inside USDA. I don't know how to make this any clearer to everybody, but this is front and center of a lot of folks' minds, and this is not a partisan issue anymore. It is really bipartisan, and it is across the board. And so I just, as General Counsel, I'm telling you that we're looking hard at all of this, but we're going to have to hear from you constantly. You're going to have to be with us constantly, both on the Hill as well as at USDA. We need your voices on this, particularly because it's gnarly and it's legally very complex, economically very complex. I personally know that we can meet this challenge. And I've been around the block, and Katie knows, and Adam both know this. I've been around the block long enough that I know what I'm looking at. And we have across the board concern and support from both parties and both houses of Congress. It's just, I've never seen it at this moment. So I think we're at that moment where we can actually push through on some of these issues, but we're going to need y'all to stay with us.
Yeah, Adam, Katie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think this is absolutely an issue that we need to take on in Congress as well, as in the administration. And it's certainly, something that we have seen. I think Senator Stabenow mentioned in her comments, we had a mandatory livestock reporting hearing that happened a few weeks ago or months ago now. And it's a hot topic of conversation, and one that we will continue to be having here on the Hill. And it is really important for all of us to be hearing from everyone about, these particular issues, as well as other farm policy issues, especially going into the 2023 Farm Bill. We have another opportunity to really set the direction for food and farm policy for the next 5 years. So that'll be a fun thing in the future, but one that we're going to need a lot of input on.
Well, I'm not going to stop this flow. So we're going to jump into another live question. Because if we need folks to get involved and to get input, let's do it right now. And we're going to, how about Dallas? I'm going to pass the mic to you, calling in from Mississippi.
Hi there. Thanks everyone for taking the time today. So we grow chickens in Mississippi on contract with Sanderson Farms. The day after the merger with Cargill Continental Grain was announced, a Sanderson representative came out to our farm with a contract for lower pay per pound of flock weight. They said it was a return to pre-COVID prices, but it was a drop even below that level. When we declined to sign the contract, they told us we would receive the pay decrease whether or not we signed and switch us to growing tray pack birds, which make even less money overall. We aren't the only growers being impacted by this behavior. Having so few integrators, no transparency or assurances about future income, and heavy debt burdens for most farmers, it makes it hard and very risky for farmers to advocate for themselves. We know that President Biden said in his executive order that his administration wants to enforce antitrust laws, combat concentration in the industry, especially issues in the ag markets. So how can we as poultry growers work with you at the USDA to enact meaningful political change to stop big ag consolidation and retaliatory practices by integrators that cause losses and uncertainty for American farmers? Thanks.
Thank you, Dallas. Janie, I saw you just came off mic. Would you like to?
And Dallas, I'm going to go back to what I said previously. This is one of those areas, Dallas, where we got to hear from you. I've been hearing from Scott Marlowe about this for 30 years. So, but I think it's really important to double down and make sure that we have very clear understanding of what's happening in real time.
Well, I mean, something that comes up for me, if we're continuing to ask farmers who are already so busy to find ways to contribute, offer their input, inform, policy from the grassroots to the grass tops, my challenge or my question would be, and maybe Dwayne, you can help me with this, is how are we going to continue, or how is the USDA, how is the USDA going to continue to encourage, not just encourage, but genuinely support farmers to concretely offer input? So it's not a barrier, it minimizes the barrier for them to contribute, but they're also finding authentic ways to really amplify their voices in policy. Are there any other suggestions or things that you're working on that can really help farmers in this way?
Yeah, I mean, here I go again with one of those stupid quotes, but the first thing that comes to mind is if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And so if someone is not there putting this issue in front of the decision makers, it's not intentional, but a lot of times those issues just don't get addressed. So the issue, to Janie's point, although it does take some time, because I'm sure Mr. McClendon down in Mississippi, there's a lot of things that he could be doing on the farm other than being here, but it's important. And I think and I applaud you for that. As we think about all the issues, and certainly with consolidation, because I've picked up in just the last couple of weeks, I picked up from some grain farmers that are concerned about some consolidation, and it's being aggravated a little bit about the disturbance caused by Hurricane Ida and ports not being as efficient. But all of those things have to continue. You got to continue to bring them up so that we can come up with workable solutions. And it's not necessarily easy, but it is important. And as we start to work through solutions that get us to a better point, that address the issue more, I think that starts to build on the trust deficit that we talked about at the start, and the starts to build a little confidence in the way things work. So other than that's all I'd add.
Great, thanks. Actually, Zach, I think we're going to continue to hammer in the solutions base and amplifying the voice of farmers. But I'm curious, in terms of loans and the connections to contracts, where do you see the role that loans can play in these contracts?
I was just going to come off and get on my soapbox about loans and finance. in a thoughtful relationship with a finance entity. Dallas would be able to go there and say, hey, my contractor is jerking me around. How about a deferral this year so that I can make another plan because they're trying to cut my throat. You probably don't have a financer that's willing to do that. FSA can. Our challenge that we face is we're not big enough to take on some of the businesses like Dallas is in, so we need that lending partner. I don't, I say partner, should put air quotes around it because they're not in many cases, especially in the poultry industry. We've got to do a better job of being able to serve producers firsthand because we have the flexibility within our primary loan servicing to make that accommodation. When Dallas comes in and says, Sanderson pulled the rug out from under me, I can't make my payment this year. We say, hey, let's take a look at what we can do together. That's how it should work with all lenders, and they don't do it, even if they've got a 90 or 95% guarantee from us against loss. So I really have a lot to say about how we can restructure finance in this country to be more like an infrastructure investment instead of like this lending and borrowing relationship, which really mimics the extractive conglomerate industries that we're dealing with.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm hoping that what we're seeing with this diverse leadership is exactly that. Like what you're lifting up is the action that we're going to see. It will take time and especially work around infrastructure, but if these intentional actions come into play, we'll start to see those results. Oh, thank you. Dwayne, you referenced Ida. And I'm glad that you did because, I've been hearing from farmers that are still trying to, literally clean up big farmers, rural farmers, also even urban farmers. I'm thinking of Cheryl in the South Bronx, who's still with Urban Gardens trying to clean up from the disaster that Ida left or created. And so I think we have a question around disaster relief. So I think this is right on time. I'm going to go live with Kendra Arneson in Louisiana.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. First, thank you all for your time today. I'm the commercial fishing representative on the Plaquemines Parish Government's Coastal Zone Management Advisory Committee. My husband and I run a small family fishing business in Venice, Louisiana. We both come from fishing families, and I can't imagine any other way of life. We have dealt with a lot of disasters here in Southeast Louisiana, and they seem to be becoming more and more frequent. Like farmers, our yield depend a lot on weather conditions, and just in the last few years, we have been impacted by multiple disasters. First, with the high river water damage to fisheries throughout Southeast Louisiana, the COVID shutdown, and multiple hurricanes to boot. Hurricane Ida crippled the Louisiana seafood industry and many of our businesses. Our family business and our home were damaged along with so many others. Trying to recover is always a challenge, but we will do our best. One huge disadvantage I've identified in the disconnect between community and decision makers when identifying solutions to these challenges, is the disconnect when identifying the solution to these challenges. My question to the USDA is, what can we do to ensure that disaster recovery dollars prioritize fishing community input to create a more resilient infrastructure and value chain for local and regional food providers to help ensure less disruption to our system? Today, listening to your other panelists and your other speakers, it's ironic how familiar the problems that they're facing ring true with the problems that we're facing in the fishing community, including imports and competing with those prices. And then there's a huge disconnect between the information available and our business participants, especially in our African American community, our Asian American community, and with the Caucasian American community. Most of our fishermen are 50 or above. So when it comes to using tech and accessing some of these applications and these resources, there's not very much technical assistance. So how can we bridge the gap?
Great, thank you. We did not forget the Fisher folk here, and I really appreciate you amplifying that really diverse question. So I saw your hand. I'm going to pass it to you, Zach.
You've had a couple things, Kendra.
Thank
Let
you,
us know-
Kendra.
Yeah, thank you. Let us know when things aren't working. But one of the things that's unique about the FSA, and we've heard a lot of derogatory comments about that county committee system and how it was a part of the problem previously. We can turn that to our favor by getting diverse voices on those county committees. Make sure that your county committee has a fisherman on it, someone that's representing your industry in those conversations, because the FSA is one of the unique federal agencies where producers have the ability to be at the front line of policy and decision-making. And oftentimes the voter turnout in those county committee elections is atrocious. So check that out as an opportunity to represent. Look also to your state committee representation opportunities. We're going to fill a lot of state committee positions, and that's the second level of that policy and decision-making in our organization that gets to review the county decisions in some cases when the producer doesn't agree. If you're interested in those type of opportunities, get your resumes to us so that we can get you in the queue for consideration with all of the other great applications that we've gotten so far. When you get a chance, thank the folks in the redfish industry, because they got aquaculture included in ELAC programs. That didn't happen until this administration took over. It was a flexibility that had always been there, but Secretary Vilsack said, get out there and help these folks and find a way. And we did, thanks to the good team over there at the FSA, the Deputy Administrator Area for Farm Programs. So again, Kendra, if you've got questions, get in touch with me.
I do want to say,
I want you to, I'm definitely going to pass the mic to you. I'm also looking at time, and we have a few more farmers I'd love to make sure that we squeeze in, because there are some topics that we probably haven't gotten to. So I'm going to give you the mic. I'm just going to ask you if we can tighten it to about maybe a minute or less, just so we can try to get some more questions in.
I'm going to shut up after I say this. Farm Aid needs to sponsor more of these conversations, and we need to show up, and we are happy to show up. And I would love it if you all would do this every month, because this is a way for us to get in the weeds with everybody. And fishers are always falling through the cracks. We've got to do a better job, but they're not the only ones. I mean, there's some, our beginning farmers and our farmers that are out there are pushing the envelope constantly about what they grow. And sometimes our programs are just not situated to actually take that in. And so we're going to have to run to keep up with you guys. But I personally would love it if we did this every month.
That's a great idea. You put it out in the ether, so we're hopefully percolating that. I'm going to just quickly pivot to Phoebe. I see you're right here, and I think you're right on time with your question. It's good to see you too, Phoebe.
Oh, it's so good to see you. I wanted to say that I really appreciated you lifting up this equity intersections. I wrote that down, and that was something that I'm holding today from this conversation. So I do want to say thank you for hosting this, for Farm Aid, for the panelists too, for answering these questions. So I just want to say good afternoon, and my name is Phoebe Gooding. My husband, Hector Lopez, and I have a small farm called Hawks Nest Healing Gardens in Durham, North Carolina. And we are a BIPOC beginning and women-owned farm. And we decided to apply for a microloan. And in the process, we were discouraged by the FSA loan officer because we were not buying a tractor or other expensive equipment, and we would not have anything for collateral unless we put up our personal house as collateral. Our house is critically important to us and our 4 children, and we couldn't take that risk. So on his recommendation, we pulled our application. And there was no further follow-up. We have no idea if we're eligible for any other programs. And so my question is, what will you do either administratively or through the Farm Bill to make sure that new and beginning farmers aren't required to use their personal home for loan collateral, especially on such a small microloan? And how will you make USDA offices more helpful for small scale, beginning BIPOC women of color farmers when these barriers do arise?
Thank you, Phoebe. That's such a great question. Who would like to start?
I can start with that one, Kiana.
Zach.
Phoebe, reach out to me. Let's talk about that application and where that FSA loan official maybe didn't do what we would like them to do. You know, the simple fact is a microloan is a very affordable loan, and we shouldn't need to go over the top securing that with a damn house. It's only a $50,000 loan at most. The payment is $153 per thousand. We can probably put together a business plan that shows adequate repayment where we don't need to take your house and your firstborn as collateral. So let's work through that, and let's help that loan officer better understand their role and this administration's commitment to doing better by our loan customers.
Yeah, thank you. Dwayne or Katie, yeah, please chime in. I think, you know, what Phoebe's talking about is something that I think a lot of farmers are still facing. We often talk about the historical neglect, but I think there's still small farmers that are still not quite getting the response on the ground that we're hearing from leadership. Dwayne, and then I'll pass it to Katie.
I'll just say from an equity standpoint, I want to reiterate what Administrator Ducheneaux is saying, and that is the responsibility of FSA to look at loans across all portfolios and making sure that we are looking at all options for servicing those loans, and that discrimination or bias is still not impacting the decisions that are being made on people's farms and lives. So I can't add anything more than that.
Yeah, and I would just add that in the 2018 Farm Bill, we took a lot of significant steps to try to help beginning farmers, to help urban farmers by creating a new office, really trying to improve some of the outreach opportunities and accessibility within USDA. We permanently funded some of these important programs, like the Farming Opportunity Training and Outreach Program, which provides specific resources to local organizations to work with farmers to get them in the door to USDA. And so, you know, this is a collective effort to try to make USDA resources more accessible to everyone. You know, government certainly plays an important role with that, but so do organizations like Farm Aid and other folks who have been really supportive to getting folks in the door. And I think one of the really important things that we'll probably continue to talk about in the next Farm Bill is farm viability, and how are we making sure that smaller farmers, that minority-owned farms, BIPOC farmers, and women all have access to continuing to get USDA resources, and how are we ensuring that their businesses are viable. We know, especially for beginning farmers, there are a lot of resources out there right now for the first, you know, year one through year three, and a lot of training resources. But how are we ensuring that folks who are starting to farm can stay farming? And how are we looking at some of those opportunities in years 3 through 8? Especially once folks have kind of gotten through that initial hurdle of learning how to farm, of starting up a business. And so I think that those are going to be conversations that are going to be really important moving forward, and really something exciting to work with the administration and with folks on the Hill to get it done.
Great, thank you. Actually, I want to dig a little deeper, and I'm going to kick it back to Zach, because I think what we're hearing is like, credit requirements and other thresholds that small scale farmers, beginning farmers are continuing, even before they get to the application. It's just such a hard barrier to kind of get their foot in the door. Are there different changes or things that can happen on the credit end, Zach, that you can share that we can see from FSA that's going to make these requirements a little bit easier or manageable or feasible for farmers of a certain scale?
Yes, I have been working with FSA loan officials for 20 years, and I have yet to see the maximum flexibility that we can offered to a producer from the beginning. And that's where we need to start. We've got to stop trying to act like a bank, and we've got to do what we can to support the economic growth of these businesses in their early stages so that they're not up against it from day one, wondering why they ever started down this road. To folks like Phoebe, to those of you out there, the oldest form of discrimination in our book is discouragement and convincing you to withdraw that application. So you don't get to exercise your appeal rights and you don't get to elevate that discussion. So don't ever withdraw an application. Make them deny you, exercise your appeal rights, get in touch with your administrator, and let's get to the bottom of this. Sometimes the case is going to be, we can't get there. But that lets us know that we need to work with our friends on the Hill to stretch our ability to get there. Because we should be serving everybody that wants to help us feed and clothe this country.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that. So it sounds like what you're saying is if FSA starts to recalibrate in terms of their risk management offerings or the credit offerings, that, you know, some of the gaps that farmers have been feeling in terms of finding the different collateral or having to put up their houses for capital, or, you know, even in some of the other programming around like matching grants. Like if you're a small farmer, an urban farmer, and you already have to build the pot to match the pot, like you're not, you know, you can't even start with the application. But is that what you're saying? I just want to make sure that we're unpacking this for like credit, and different forms of collateral, but that there's going to be maybe the stretch so that folks that have been struggling to connect to, say, bridge loans or revolving loan funds, that there might be a way that the FSA is going to really start to move things, change legislation or change policy, change the relationships so that there is a genuine connection or a road here that's a little bit more feasible than maybe years prior.
You bet. Thanks, Kiana. And I think Katie and Adam would get pretty upset if we tried to change legislation, but we'll work with them when asked. But
I got excited.
We need to do a better job of putting our best foot forward to start with and advertising what our flexibilities are, instead of keeping it behind the veil, and then only those that know how to find the handbooks and read through the handbooks can understand our programs. So one of the things that we're working on is a loan amortization tool that'll be right there on our front page. So you can see a $50,000 micro loan has these kind of payments. Can your plan justify these kind of payments? If it is, let's talk. If it can't, let's figure out why. But we don't advertise our flexibility very well because there's pressure from the lending industry to keep us in our lane. And there's pressure on us from our friends on the Hill, our friends at GAO, to be accountable and have a program that's built on integrity and repayment. But if we don't exercise that flexibility to start with, we're creating the challenges with repayment. So we're definitely going to do a better job of advertising that and serving our people better.
Great. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And I think what we're going to see is, you know, what we've been hearing is accountability. I think farmers are going to hopefully continue to amplify the accountability that we hope to see. I think organizations like Farm Aid are going to help leverage and build that collective power for farmers. And even, you know, the folks on the ground that haven't maybe quite connected yet, that there are some channels and voices that they respect and know to move in. So I hope to continue to see that. Let's take another question around, I know we're getting close to time, but I'm hoping that y'all stay with us a little bit longer. I want to pivot to a question from Jill in Washington. She's going to go live. Jill? Okay, we might be having some broadband connections again, or some Wi-Fi connectivity issues. I want to maybe pass it to Andrea or Andrea. Please let me know how to say your name correctly, from Illinois, around land access. You know, I think we've talked about so many different topics, but what I'm really curious and interested to hear is a little bit more about land access.
Thank you so much, Farm Aid, for hosting this. I am really excited to be here, and thank you to this administration for taking the time to hear our voices. So my name is Andrea Hazard. I am a 6th-generation farmer and miller at Hazard Free Farm in Pecatonica, Illinois. A billionaire owns more land in Illinois and the United States than any other landowner. Billionaires and tenant farmers. And it reminds me of the European countryside that many of our forebears fled. Private equity and venture capital threaten the ability of actual farmers, such as myself, to purchase and steward this land that is in desperate need of repair, as it has been depreciated by economic extraction for more than a century. The government controls interest rates, taxes, the printing of money, the price of food, and the chemicals sprayed on it. What policies does your administration envision to disentangle land values from speculative and predatory markets?
Sorry, I had a lag. I apologize. Thank you for your question, Andrea. That was a solid question. Zach and Janie, I will pass it to you. So maybe Janie, if we heard from Zach, so maybe Janie, if you want to chime in first, and then we'll pass the mic to Zach.
Well, that question is extremely layered and complex, and I'm not even sure that I can handle all of it in a short amount of time. But, you know, when Congress actually passed the 106 language, they actually talked about land access. And they recognize, I think Katie's nodding her head, that land access is a huge issue, not just in Illinois, but everywhere. And I'm of the opinion that we're going to have to redouble our efforts very quickly. And we're going to have to get around this issue of land access, and really, it has regional differences and it has local differences. And there's a lot of moving parts in how to access land. But this is as far as I'm concerned, this has been a high priority issue in a lot of people's minds for quite some time. I can think of 25 years ago going to a Scott Marlowe. Scott and I were sitting next to each other at an event that was looking at this issue then, and we kind of kicked the can on it all the time. I think we're at a moment, and I hope Katie and will agree with me on this, where we actually are going to have to roll up our sleeves and figure this out, because land access is getting more and more and more of a crisis for all farmers, not just young and beginning and new. And I mean, it's for existing farmers that have been around for 50 years, it's a problem. So, you know, I'm happy to, you know, get all of OGC mobilized to put our 2 bits into it. But I think it's going to take an all hands on deck approach to actually discombobulate the policy interventions that can happen. And internally within USDA, we got to really have that kind of deep conversation about land access. It's a top priority for me.
Thanks,
Yes.
Jeannie. And thanks for the question, Andrea. I think we have to step back and we have to ask ourselves why. Why is there a limit on the amount of money, Andrea, that you can borrow from the FSA to secure real estate when the payment amount is only $45 per year per 1,000 that you borrow right now? That's at our 3.25% interest rate over 40 years. Our limit, though, is $600,000. This program effectively has no cost to the taxpayer. And as long as we stay to our definition of small and family farmers, there is no good reason for it to have a limit. It doesn't cost the taxpayer anything, and it's providing the solution to exactly what you're articulating so well, stopping that conglomerate from taking up that ag land and keeping it in that apparatus between the producer and the consumer.
And if I can just add one more thing to that too, because, you know, I think Janie mentioned it quite well. This is a very complicated conversation with a lot of different layers, and especially because a lot of land issues are local issues. And so, you know, figuring out ways to work with state and local government to tackle these issues, and finding ways to partner, whether it's with the state departments of agriculture, municipalities, county committees, all of these different folks really need to be at the table as we're thinking about land access and land issues, because it is a multifaceted conversation. And I'm with you all at USDA. I think we need to roll up our sleeves and really start working on this creatively, but we need to make sure that we're including our local partners in those conversations as well, because it is such a community driven and very specific conversation in particular regions and communities around the country.
Oh, great.
I want to say one last thing about this, and I promise I won't take very long, Kiana.
Okay.
She gives me the side eye all the time. Ask an African American landowner and ask a Native American landowner about land access, and they'll tell you how critical it is. Yes. And I will tell you, I think we're at a moment where everybody else is waking up to this as well. And land access and keeping the land that we've got in agriculture and expanding the land that we have, dedicated agriculture, is very critical.
Thank you. No, I think that is a great point to wrap up on. And I noticed that there have been a couple of more questions in the chat, and I think we might have had a video, but I think we are short on time. So I'm hoping that we can wrap here. That it's a great point to land on, Janie. If I would take a moderator's privilege and say, just to piggyback on that, when we're talking about land access, I'm hoping when we're rolling up our sleeves, we're rolling up our sleeves on the breadth of land access and tenure on the land, on the land that we're on here on Turtle Island. And, I'm thinking of folks that may not be able to buy land, but are land stewards from community land trusts or urban gardens and other smaller spaces to our rural partners and comrades. Like, what does land access look like? This is a critical time and point, and how are this leadership and our agencies going to support the breadth of land tenure and stewardship here. So I just wanted to offer my genuine, authentic, deep gratitude to everybody for coming to sharing so openly and vibrantly and bringing such transparency. I think, like you said, these are multi-layered questions. There's questions that we haven't gotten to, questions that will continue to come up, that I'm hoping that this feels like the beginning of really bold dialogue and constructive dialogue that I just wanted to thank Farm Aid for giving us this opportunity to thank you all for joining. I know this is really busy times for each and every one of you, but to be able to show up and be able to take our direct farmer questions is a really great opportunity. And thanks for me. Thanks for having me here. I guess this is literally my bell. Scott, I do not know how that happened. It was perfect timing. Scott, I'm gonna pass it to you. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kiana. What a terrific job. Thank you all. Thanks to all of our panelists, Zach Ducheneaux, Janie Hipp, Dwayne Goldman, Kim Nasons, and Adam Schiff. Thank you all very, very much for being here, for such a long, sitting on the hot seat for such a long period of time. I also want to really acknowledge that today, between the Secretary's comments and all of our panelists here, we've had a huge commitment from both congressional folks and from USDA in terms of very senior leadership time. And I want to recognize we're very grateful that we've had such wonderful representation here and such an engaged conversation and the open opportunity to follow up with y'all. Speaking of which, we have a very long list of questions that have come in the chat. We will be pulling down the chat. We will be passing on these questions to folks. We will be sending out an email all around to folks on following up, and a way to collect some of the, to share between us some of the follow-up emails as they go back and forth. And so we can continue this conversation. But we, you know, I keep writing down what Janie said. We got to hear from you often. You got to be, you know, you got to stick with us, and we got to hear from you often. So that's now going to be our marching orders for the next. Before we finish, we have 2 more videos that we have received from senators. And they represent very different visions of agricultural policy going forward from here. One of those is from Senator Thompson of Pennsylvania, and the other is from Cory Booker of New Jersey. So we'd like to go ahead and roll those 2 videos.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this critical discussion on the 2023 Farm Bill. As many of you know, I'm Congressman G.T. Thompson, the proud representative of Pennsylvania's 15th Congressional District and the Republican leader of the House Agriculture Committee. Now, I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person today, but I wanted to send my gratitude to each and every one of you for your dedication to ensuring the next Farm Bill is crafted with the interests of farmers, ranchers, and producers in mind. It's events like these that make this possible. Listening sessions, roundtables, town halls, and outreach meetings are incredibly important in gathering public input from those directly impacted by Farm Bill programs. So thank you again for doing your part. Unfortunately, we're very behind in conducting meaningful oversight for the 2018 Farm Bill. America's farmers, ranchers, and producers are recovering from a difficult year combating COVID-19, natural disasters, and more. And we must keep our foot on the gas to ensure these folks get the support that they need. The 2023 Farm Bill helps our rural communities and farm families combat the many challenges 2020 presented, and now is the time to get to work. From the commodity safety net and crop insurance to rural broadband and disaster relief, the Agriculture Committee must take a hard look at these programs and make necessary reforms to ensure that they are adequately tailored to meet the needs of rural America today and for years to come. Another issue that deserves our attention and an informed, thoughtful dialogue is climate change. Now, I believe wholeheartedly conservative climate solutions increase innovation and technology, and they are the right approach for farmers, ranchers, foresters, and rural America rather than burdensome overregulation. If we really want to reduce global emissions, hindering U.S. production is the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be taking steps to ensure the global competitiveness of our farmers. The 2018 Farm Bill's voluntary programs help farmers implement new practices that sequester carbon, reduce emissions, and adopt more energy efficient farming practices. And I believe we should continue down that path as we consider proposals for the 2023 Farm Bill. Lastly, I want to touch briefly on an issue of great importance, ensuring the success of the next generation of farmers. As you all know, the average age of our farmers continues to increase. Congress should be in the business of helping nurture and grow the number of new and beginning farmers, not discouraging new generations from doing so. However, the elimination of stepped-up bases would do just that. To date, the Agriculture Committee has been successful in fighting back against these harmful policies and punitive taxes, but the fight isn't over. But you can rest assured, I will continue to be a voice for rural America and our nation's farmers, ranchers, foresters, and producers as we continue this fight and gear up for the 2023 Farm Bill. I want to thank you all again for affording me the opportunity to speak with you briefly today. Enjoy the weekend and God bless.
God, I want to thank Farm Aid for bringing us together, and really Farm Aid for your continued work and commitment to keeping family farmers all across our country on their land and honoring our collective heritage. For nearly 40 years, Farm Aid has been advocating for policies that help farmers to thrive. Farm Aid is working tirelessly to create more markets for family farmers and to strengthen local and regional food systems. And Farm Aid provides critical support services to farm families that are in crisis. I am deeply grateful for everything that Farm Aid has done to continue and continues to do. It resonates with my mission on the Ag Committee. I view my work as advocating for family farmers in the Senate and building on the work and foundation that Farm Aid has laid over these decades. The American food system is broken. It's as simple as that. It is actually working against nearly everyone it's touching. It's hurting people that live in urban communities like me, and it's hurting our rural communities, sucking out resources, sucking out money. It's hurting farmers, and it hurts farm workers, and it's hurting our collective health as our diet suffers, and diseases are just soaring in the United States. We know that the consumer share, the consumer dollar spent on food, the share of it that farmers have, has dwindled dramatically. In fact, the only winners in this system are the massive, consolidated multinational corporations that are now dominating our food industry and too often are dictating our food policy, as independent family farmers are being driven to the brink of bankruptcy or pushed into bankruptcy and foreclosure by this system that has been put in place in just recent decades by these big corporations. And we know that there's terrible history that has affected even our black farmers. They have been discriminated against specifically and have lost millions of acres of farmland because of this broken system and because of discrimination that targeted them, draining billions of dollars of generational wealth from their communities. And you know this, in 1920, there are nearly 1 million black farmers. Today, it's estimated that there's less than 50,000 remaining. We are in this interconnected nation where we all need each other to succeed. We know that we need change. It's time to create a new system, one that supports and centers family farmers and ranchers in our food systems. People who know how to be stewards of the land, stewards of animals, who can create healthy systems. We need to start incentivizing the kind of policies that empower them and empower, as a result, all of us. A new system that makes farmers and ranchers leaders in the issues of the day, from health and well-being of individuals to even they are the key to be a solution for climate change. We need a new system that protects and lifts up our food and farm workers who are too often being injured on the job or not being paid a living wage. We need a system that promotes health by creating plentiful access to healthy foods like fresh fruits and vegetables. And this new system starts with enacting policies that ensure a level playing field for all of our farmers and ranchers, and holds the consolidated multinational corporations accountable for the many harms that they're creating. Now, I introduced legislation that a lot of farmers know about. It would strengthen the Packers and Stockyard Act and would put a moratorium on these new large factory farms. I've introduced legislation that makes big, targeted investments in voluntary USDA conservation programs like CSP and EQIP that farmers and ranchers know are critical, but they're oversubscribed. These programs can be part of the solution, helping our farmers and ranchers lead on climate change and actually make their farms more resilient, actually help with flooding and other extreme weather crises. We know that farmers can lead on these issues and more. I've also put a moratorium, at least legislation in that would put a moratorium on new big ag mergers. I've introduced legislation to comprehensively address the discrimination we've seen in the past against African American farmers, and I am putting in legislation and have put in legislation that would empower farmers to giving them market power to control their own economic destinies and stop slanting the playing field against them. I have also introduced bipartisan legislation to reform our broken federal checkoff programs, which are slanted towards big corporations and against family farmers. All of the issues I am working with are along the lines of policies that work to nurture and grow a new beginning for farmers, for people that are connected to our land, that will be in many ways stewards of our heritage. And I think the groundwork for the next big fight coming, which is the next Farm Bill. But even before that, as Congress looks to pass a transformative budget reconciliation bill, we have the chance to make significant progress on some of the issues I've discussed, especially on addressing climate change, centering farmers, and on getting debt forgiveness and other assistance done for farmers in crisis, particularly those like Black farmers who've been specifically targeted by past discrimination. We know farmers need our help, but helping them helps all of us. Farmers, going back generations and generations, have been at the center of American prosperity. They have fueled America's well-being. They have helped generations be strong and help to lead the world. It goes back to that connection we have to the earth, to the soil, that all of this is part of an integrated system that we cannot pervert like we are now. I believe in farmers, and therefore I believe in Farm Aid. This organization is incredible, and I want to thank you all. I intend to continue to work alongside you and family farmers and be a voice for your issues now and as we head into the Farm Bill debate. And I'm very excited for the progress I believe that we together can make and will make in the coming years. You are doing the Lord's work. You are righteous, righteous members of our nation. And may God continue to strengthen you, to bless you, and to ensure that we have a more abundant future for all.
We want to thank you all for participating in this Farmer Town Hall. We want to thank the USDA folks who are still with us, who have been so forthcoming and so honest and so open to this conversation. We want to thank all of the members of Congress, both the members who were here in person and those who submitted video comments and who wanted to be here. We want to thank the staffers, the folks from both the Ag Committee and also USDA and other folks who helped to make this whole event possible. I want to also thank the person who did an astronomical amount of work to make this happen, and that is Julie Obodzinski. Julie has worked tirelessly behind the scenes, making all of this come together and bringing everybody together. She's done an extraordinary job. I especially want to thank all of the farmers and all of the partners who are our family, who help put together comments, put together questions, entered things into the chat. None of it goes away. All of it will be saved. We'll build off of all of it. I want to thank all of you so much for being a part of this, and thank everyone for your time, your efforts, and the long-term commitment that everyone has to pursuing these issues over time. I looked through the list, and it's been a time. We've had a time. If you can't be with us here in Connecticut in person, and by the way, here at the Xfinity Theater in Hartford, Connecticut, I believe that there are still tickets available. So if you're within striking distance, come on over. But if not, there are 3 ways for you to watch the show tomorrow. You can stream the Farm Aid 2021 webcast at farmaid.org starting at 2:00 Eastern time. You can tune into the Sirius XM Willie's Roadhouse, which is channel 59, or the Dave Matthews Band radio channel, which is channel 30, starting at noon tomorrow, or watch Circle Network's live on-air broadcast from Farm Aid 2021 beginning at 8:00 p.m. tomorrow evening. We're actually going to finish up a couple of minutes early and give you back 6 minutes of your day. Thank you all very much for being a part of this. We're very grateful, and we'll see you soon. Thank you all very much.